Okay. So guys, how y'all doing today, first of all? We did it. We're streaming. Let's get rid of this. Click. We're here. We're streaming. We're streaming away. I'm gonna move that down here. Yeah, that'll be good. So, we are doing something new. I just got to 1,000 people, 1,000 followers on TikTok. So I'm about to hit the go live button on TikTok. And we're going to see if my setup is going to be able to do it. So if the whole thing comes down right now, we know what's happened, okay? So here I go. Go live. All right. So far, so good. I remember it always did this. So for those of you who remember, I used to stream on TikTok before, and then I got banned from TikTok. And you obviously get banned from TikTok for the obvious reasons that you get banned from TikTok. So, here we go. We're going to try this again. We're going to see what's going on. I hope you guys are all doing well out there. I hope you guys are all having a beautiful one. I hope everything's going on. Already we've got somebody who's joined on TikTok. Fantastic. Well, today we are discussing, as we discuss every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on the live, the swift decline of capital and the decline of Western civilization. So, yeah, we can't have new stuff, right? Something new is always a bad thing. Algo flu incoming, says Long Defiant. Of course. There's always some disaster. There's always some flu. There's always something that's going to come and going to wipe us out. It's constant and it's normal, right? It's constant and it's normal. Oh, got a lot of people coming in on TikTok. How you guys doing? If you'd like to talk to me, please follow the link to the YouTube channel, right? I find the TikTok lives to be very insane. Very insane and full of insanity, and so it's easier to engage with my more dedicated community. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Capitalism is in decay. It is in total decline. Yeah, what's algo flu, Long Defiant? Is this going to be the next COVID thing? Are we all going to lock down into our houses because of algo flu? What's algo flu? Is this something that I'm supposed to be freaking out about? No. Algo flu. Influenza. Not seeing anything about algo flu, Long Defiant. All right. We're all going to die to something, so let's start with the good news. Okay? Let's start with some good news. I'd like to start with this quick video here. Again, for those of you on TikTok, I'm showing this video to my YouTube channel. This is a list of all of the protests that are happening in the United States in regards to Palestine, right? You don't see a lot of news about this because I think corporate media doesn't want you to know. Corporate media doesn't want you to realize how much solidarity there actually is for people out in the world. People don't actually want to know. People don't want, corporate media doesn't want you to be aware about how much support there is for Palestine. They want to keep things nice and quiet. They want to make sure that you don't know what's happening. Since protests began for the Palestinian issue, since they began, we've got 5,425 protests across the United States. And of course, you can see they center around the major cities, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Sounds like something from Blade Runner. Algo flu. So apparently, Cotton, good to see you. Apparently I have a tornado going off in my neighborhood. Fantastic. Isn't that always great, right? Tornado warning. At least you're getting a warning about it. That's nice. So, moving on to other good news. This is less like good news because it's good for us, and it's more just good news because haha. That's really how I feel about it, which is from Fortune magazine, Fidelity cuts value of X stake, implying 73% decline in former Twitter since Elon Musk's takeover. Haha. Haha. What a dweeb this guy is. What a dweeb Elon Musk is. Fidelity's blue chip growth fund cut the value of its position in X by 5.7% in February, implying a 73% decline in the former Twitter Inc. since Elon Musk bought the social media company. I love that, like, we've put so much faith in this total dimwit, that this guy Elon Musk is supposed to be like our Lord and Savior, and yet he's like a total failson. We're all sitting here and we're all supposed to take Elon Musk seriously as a person. What's his big accomplishment? Like, for real. What's Elon Musk's big accomplishment? What is the thing that he has done that's actually going to make us all go, oh boy, I'm so glad that Elon Musk was around? What did he build? What has he done? What has he achieved? What has he accomplished? Because near as I can see, he's essentially a front for the United States military, and that's all he's ever been, and that's all he ever is. Right? That he's going to get us to Mars. This is a serious thing that he is definitely going to do. He's not just using that as a cover to militarize space. Right? Like if the United States military was doing the stuff that Elon Musk was doing, you'd be screaming about it. But because it's some private dweeb who's supposed to be like the next Tony Stark, right? He's supposed to be Tony Stark genius, super intelligent Thomas Edison guy, right? Entrepreneurship from sea to shining sea, right? We're all supposed to take that seriously and believe that because Elon Musk is doing it, it's going to be good for some reason for us, when he's a cover. He's an obvious cover for the United States military so that they can militarize space, so that they can build SpaceX, so that they can build military assets in space, so that when China and Russia begin space exploration and begin doing things like they say they're going to do, like build moon bases and things like this, we'll be able to blow them up. We'll be able to spy on them, and we'll be able to blow them up, because that's all we do, right? We don't actually build anything, right? We don't actually do anything. We don't actually accomplish anything, right? We just blow shit up. That's all we do, right? We're not interested in actually long-term planning or doing anything or building something, right? Compton, if you're experiencing a tornado, you should leave. I'm just putting that out there, right? Just leave. Yeah, space debris, right? Like, I mean, I've heard from someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was talking about how much space debris is up in space. For us to actually get into space and for us to actually do anything meaningful in space, we're going to have to clear all the space debris that we've created, right? It's going to be like a generation of clearing space debris before we're able to do anything serious, right? It's just crazy. It's just nuts. Eric writes, oh, you're talking about Trotsky. Learning about Trotsky, lost respect for him. He didn't side with the Nazis, right? Like, I mean, did he side with the Nazis? I'm going to have to see something more substantial, I think, about that one. Like, I mean, oftentimes when these accusations come towards someone like Trotsky, it's usually like you got to connect a whole bunch of dots. It has like it's like that meme from It's Always Sunny, and like Charlie's sitting there and he's got like the connecting dots behind him, and he's like, "Look, I'm telling you, you got to look at the dots." And I'm just like, I need something a little bit more concrete. Like, Trotsky was a bit of a dweeb, but I mean, he obviously wanted power, but it's fine. It's fine. But on to more good news, right? On to some fun stuff. In the last 10 years, this here is from Medium, 95% of deaths linked to extremism in the United States were committed by the right wing, compared to 4% by the left. In recent years, the United States has witnessed a disturbing surge in extremist violence. This article delves into the data provided by the Anti-Defamation League and sheds light on the disproportionate impact of right-wing extremism. We explore the numbers, trends, and underlying factors driving this unsettling phenomenon. Extremism, once relegated to the fringes, has now infiltrated the mainstream. The past decade has seen a dramatic increase in mass killings linked to extremist ideologies. The ADL's comprehensive report reveals alarming statistics, emphasizing the urgent need for awareness, prevention, and intervention. The ADL report, key findings. Threefold increase in extremist mass killings between the 1970s and the 2000s. The United States experienced between 2 and 7 domestic extremism-related mass killings per decade. However, in the 2010s, this number skyrocketed to 21. The trend has persisted, with 5 domestic extremist mass killings occurring in 2001 and 2022 alone. Right-wing extremism dominates. The ADL's data unequivocally points to right-wing extremism as the primary driver of these violent acts. All extremist killings identified in 2022 were linked to right-wing extremism, with a notable emphasis on white supremacy. These ideologies have fueled racist attacks, targeting marginalized communities across the nation. Victims and casualties. The toll on human lives is staggering. Between 2010 and 2020, 164 people lost their lives in ideological extremist-related mass killings. This figure surpasses any other decade except the 1990s, when the Oklahoma City bombing claimed 168 lives. The victims represent a diverse cross-section of society, from black shoppers in Buffalo to patrons of an LGBT nightclub in Colorado Springs. It's almost as though the United States and the right wing are using terrorism in order to keep people in line. The Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a gunman opened fire at the Tree of Life synagogue during a Shabbat service, resulting in the death of 11 worshippers. The perpetrator, influenced by anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, targeted the Jewish community. Yeah, so when people come in and they've got these Jewish anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, right? We take that seriously. We ban those people. The Captain over on Twitch, good to see you, my man. I hope you're doing well out there, bud. Oh, man. Content, stop watching my stream and get to a safe place. If you are genuinely telling me that you are seeing tornadoes and that you need, like, stop watching. Get out of here, bro. A box. I am on TikTok once again. Yeah, they banned me once and now I'm back. Hello, TikTok. How are you? Hope you guys are all doing well. Wow, the TikTok feed is actually not full of the usual nonsense. I do feel in the last couple of years, there has been it's almost like a sobering. I don't know how to describe it. I just think that, like, even like 2 years ago, a guy like me who was talking online would be ridiculed, mocked, discarded, thrown aside, all the snide bullshit CIA talking points. And I'm just getting less and less of that over time. I'm just getting less and less of the usual CIA talking points and the less and less of that kind of nonsense, because I think people are starting to recognize that, oh, wait, everything I'm saying is true. That everything I'm saying is correct. That now I'm getting like, oh, I don't agree with your solutions. We all acknowledge there's a problem, but I don't agree with your solutions. And then I listen to their solutions, and their solutions are things like, what we need to do is sacrifice ourselves to the corporate death cult more. That's what we need to do, and that's just absurdism at the highest level. Like, I mean, there's a reason why it exists, but, I mean, the billionaire class itself funds such initiatives. They'd love it if you sacrificed your entire existence and your entire life to them, sure. Anyway, this article that I'm currently reading really reminds me, like, it's about mass shootings, and it's about mass extremist events. And it's pointing out that the right wing perpetrates more of these than the left wing, obviously, because the left wing is about helping people, right? That's what's so funny about the conversation. Like, the left wing is like, everyone should have food and shelter. And the right wing is like, we should kill the Jews. And people are like, these are the same. I can't tell the difference. It's gotten kind of embarrassing. And but I've become, like, completely desensitized to these mass extremist events. Like, I've just become completely desensitized to it. I can't say that I'm, like, I hear about them and I'm just like, yeah, like, you guys have done nothing about it. We've done nothing about it. We don't care. We obviously don't care. And so it's just difficult for me to have emotions or feelings about it. And, like, the only real reason I'm reading this article is this because it's, like, an actual study of the phenomenon, right? Like, I can't deal with these on individual levels anymore. So according to the article, factors driving the surge. Several factors contribute to the rise in extremist violence. Number 1, polarization and echo chambers. The digital age has amplified echo chambers where extremist ideologies thrive. Yeah, you can see them, right? Ben Shapiro is one. Jordan Peterson is another. I'm on several subreddits and things like this specifically to watch these echo chambers in action. Like, my favorite part about these echo chambers, one in particular, Canada Sub. Canada Sub is the best because it's so stupid. It's like so, they're proud of how stupid they are. They'll literally provide you links that disprove themselves while saying the link that they provided actually supports them. Like, that's the level of dim-witted stupidity that we're talking about. But because they live in this echo chamber where they're reinforcing one another, they all feel like they're winning. Like, it's incredible to watch, right? So you take that kind of like real dim-wittedness and you manifest it into the real world, and have all of these dimwits find one another where their own theses are being disproven by themselves, right? We got XOPED, I gotta mention you, dude. You're liking the live like 100 million times. Thanks so much, bud. I appreciate that. That's really kind of you, and I'm really glad to see that. Honestly, the TikTok already has like 800 likes. You guys better be liking the stream out there in the world. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles. I wanted to ask, says Captain, I wanted to ask if you heard that Israel set up kill zones. Yeah. Like, we've all heard by now. Like, this is another thing. I'm really struggling to report on the Israeli disaster because it's like, yeah. The destruction of the World Central Kitchen, what's being called the World Central Kitchen Massacre, right? Like, the horrifying details emerging about the World Central Kitchen Massacre. I'm waiting for an article, right? I don't necessarily want to be reporting on this through Twitter. But there was a convoy that was sent from an organization called the World Central Kitchen, which is an international relief aid organization that exists and is in Gaza right now providing aid. The convoy was struck 3 times in succession, with the drones chasing the wounded aid workers from vehicle to vehicle to make sure they were all killed. No legit pretext and precise coordination with the IDF. So, like, horrifying to be sure, right? And just another little tiny scrap of evidence that these people are like a Nazi level threat. Like, there's just no other way to describe these guys anymore, right? Like, they're not even trying. They don't care to try. The IDF itself and people on and ministers in the Knesset are celebrating this openly, right? Like, it's just Nazism. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. Like, this is Zionazism. It's just what it is. And the sorry, just a dimwit on Twitch being like, liberals, yeah, liberals are the best. Yeah, liberals have like literally helped nobody in their life. All they're really good at is just preparing the field for fascists to take over, which is exactly what we're watching happen right now. Ranger Doomer, good to see you. Left person says, we should make sure everyone has food, water, and shelter. Literally everyone else who is not from the left. How dare you? That kind of thinking murders people. Yeah, it's the most aggravating thing alive. Like, you want to believe that everybody who exists in reality is capable of the most modest rational thinking, right? On just a, like, basic, like, we live in a society level of thinking, like, in the most basic, reality exists and you are surrounded by other people and there are systems who exist upon us, you would think that the first thing that everybody would be interested in and incentivized to do is ensure that every single person has access to food and shelter. But if you say that out loud, there's a healthy section of the society that obviously has a problem with that. Like, really obviously has a problem with that. And just wants to make sure that food and shelter is withheld from everybody. Wants to make sure that everybody is living in desperation and poverty. Wants to make sure that that's the case. right? And they're called liberals. Like, I mean, these are the people who are involved in that, who are interested in withholding food and shelter from everybody so that you have to sell yourself into wage slavery, right? Like, that's the system. That's the structure of the system. And we're not going to get out of it because there's huge sections of the populace who have completely bought into this idea, right? Like, at this point, we are looking at an abandonment paradigm where the society is abandoning itself. The people who are still like pro-capitalist are lunatics. Like, they've obviously lost their minds, and there's no point reasoning with them anymore, because I don't think they can be reasoned with. Like, just in the same way that I don't think flat earthers can be reasoned with, in the same way that I don't think, like, at this stage in the game, if you're still like a fundamentalist, born-again Christian, like Jesus Christ is coming back tomorrow and solving all our problems, I don't think that you can be reasoned with. I do kind of hesitate to say it, because I used to be one of those guys. I used to believe that Jesus Christ was coming back, but then I grew up, right? And so it's possible, but we're just out of time. Like, we're just out of time. We can't be negotiating anymore. You understand? 1 second, guys. Sorry, Milo. Get out of the cords, dude. What are you doing? What are you doing, dude? Get out of the cords. What are you doing, dude? Get out of the cords. Get out of there. Jeez Louise, dude. You can sit literally anywhere else. My dog literally walked right into all the cords that I've got here. Jeez Louise, little guy. Come lie down, buddy. Just a little pug, just head first, right into all of these cords. That's hilarious. Yeah, like, we've got to start normalizing calling these guys flat earthers, because there's nothing else to do, right? Like, if you're genuinely going to stand in front of me and deny the existence of climate change, if you're genuinely going to stand up in front of me and try to defend the system of capital, then I just don't think you can be reasoned with anymore. I think that you've become unhinged, and becoming unhinged is like a hysteria-based thing. Like, we still have to provide evidence. This is the part about it that is a little bit irritating. We still have to provide evidence. We still need to justify our positions, but we need to be doing that to ourselves and for ourselves. We're not convincing anybody anymore, right? We're just sharpening our arguments so that we know what we are up to for ourselves, because we live with evidence. We make decisions based on evidence. And when you make decisions based on evidence, right, you're constantly seeking evidence out. And for me, like, I'm no longer interested in keeping people in my life who are not going to respond to evidence. Like, if I provide you with evidence and I show you evidence is here and there it is, it's real, and you don't respond to it, then I don't need you in my life, right? You get to go in a little corner with all of the other crazy, kooky little flat earthers and climate change deniers and fascists and Nazis, right? Like, and we are obviously going to pay like a heavy societal price for allowing people who refuse to acknowledge reality taking power, and there's a lot of those, right? I would argue that the entire Congress, Senate, the presidency, the Supreme Court are all unresponsive to evidence. I just don't think that they think that evidence matters, and they exist in that kind of state. And so we live in this paradigm. Oh, we got a guy named Zach waiting for the evidence for what? Sorry, bud. I don't pay that much attention to the TikTok feed because it's usually a dumpster fire. If you want to talk to me directly and get questions answered, right, I'm talking to my YouTube, link in the description. That could be you. It'd be easy to get here. So I don't spend too much time looking at TikTok just because it's crazy. Aren't I Canadian? There it is. Oh, yeah. Here's a piece of news that I think is actually really of note. Because we're about to go through like a really heavy censorship regime. Like, it's pretty likely that people like me, right? I think right now there's a great content creator named Rathbone who is rightly getting spread around a lot. There's like Pokey Pete. There's a bunch of these guys, right? There's a bunch of good content creators. I was doing this for a little while before my channel got banned. There's Midwestern Marks, right? A lot of these guys, Zach writes, just answer if innocent people were killed by the communists during a war. Like, dude, they were fighting against the Nazis that were invading them. Like, I don't know what you want. Like, it's always weird that you have these sort of, like, apologists for Nazism who just generally forget about the Nazis completely and pretend as though the communists are the ones that are at fault somehow. It's sort of amazing to watch. And it's that kind of dim-wittedness that's leading us into the corporate state is trying to ban actual legitimate discourse. Right? They're trying to ban people who provide evidence so that all that you're left with are dimwits like Peterson walking around being like, I don't know if there's a, what could it possibly, there's sort of both sides on the Nazi thing. Climate change is so complicated, right? So these guys get on the front page. This is for your For You page. This is your whole thing, right? This is your major thing. But if somebody stands up and says, you sound like a raving lunatic who is obviously wrong about everything, that person gets banned, right? And here's how they're going to do it. This is Time Magazine reporting what to know about Meta's political content limit and how to turn it off on Instagram, right? So they're going to sidestep the issue of banning people outright, because what they're going to do is they're going to label people as political. They're going to ban them, but then give people the option to unban them, right? So you can go into your feed and check that box, and then you'll get that content again. But they're not going to tell anybody they've done this. So everyone will just experience the feed and just be like, oh, okay, there's no political content on this, right? I guess nobody's making that. I guess that's not what's being blah, blah, blah. Because if you don't know about this, then it gets taken off the platform completely for you. Meta has come under, this is from Time Magazine, by the way. Meta has come under fire in recent days from social media users startled to discover they've been automatically enrolled in a relatively new setting that reduces political content on Instagram and Threads, with the company being accused of censorship amid an important global election year. What's kind of terrifying as well from my perspective is it shows you they already have lists. Right, like just how the McCarthy era had blacklists, right, with anti-communism, they already have these lists. They're already putting people on these lists, right? People like me would already be on this list. They would already put us here and say, "Oh, you're political." So there you go. And of course, guys like Shapiro and Peterson, you know, the frauds and the liars and the lunatics, are all going to make it through that filter because they'll just pay. Right? They'll just take $100 million or $1 million or however much it's going to be in pay, and they'll get through that filter, right? So all you'll see is a bunch of Peterson clips just foaming at the mouth the way he does, right? This is not okay. Civil rights attorney Scott Hetchinger posted on X, formerly Twitter. Instagram is now trying to suppress political content just months before the next presidential election. Why is Meta attempting to censor the democratic process? Why would you say that Meta is attempting to censor the democratic process? Hard to imagine. I mean, mainly because America doesn't have a democratic process anymore, right? There's no more democratic process in the United States. It doesn't exist. We live in an oligarchy. The democracy has been completely destroyed. There is no way to vote our way out of this fascist system that we live in now, right? Both parties are in on it. They are allies. They work together in order to maintain the system of capital, and they'll definitely turn fascist in order to do it, right? So let's not fool ourselves and believe we live in a democratic process. In fact, Meta announced that it was rolling out the setting in a little-noticed February blog post, saying that it wanted to make its platforms a great experience for everyone, right? When they say everyone, they mean people with money who don't want to feel guilty about the poverty they're creating, and claiming it would not filter content from followed accounts, but rather would limit its algorithm from proactively surfacing political content from unfollowed accounts. The new setting, which users can opt out of, applies to the feeds, Reels, Explore, and suggested users part of Instagram and Threads. This comes as Meta has continued to reduce political content on its Facebook platform since 2001. Here's what to know about the political content setting and how to turn it off if desired. Why is Meta reducing political content? One of the top pieces of feedback we're hearing from our community right now. Guys, I'm so sorry. I have to pause the stream. My dog is like scratching. I took him down 3 times. It seems not to matter. What? Sorry, guys. I gotta pause. Okay, Milo. Okay. Good boy, buddy. Sorry about that, guys. I like literally took my dog out to go pee and poo like 5 times today. So that's quite annoying, honestly. How you guys all doing out there? Jeez Louise. I'm basically restarting the stream. Javier Milei, yeah. Yeah, people vote for these people. Like, that's the thing. Right? Like, what we are facing a systemic issue. We are facing a systemic problem. We are looking at a systemic issue that is going from the bottom to the very top, right? Where the people who are in power are interested in maintaining their power. They're not interested. And I'm not talking about the president. I'm not talking about the prime minister. I'm talking about the wealthy people, the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffetts, the Charlie Mungers, The people who actually have wealth and power in the country, the Rothschilds, right? People, the investor groups, the shareholders, BlackRock, Vanguard, right? That the political classes as they exist in our society work for them, right? That's all, that they just work for them. And they're not actually interested in resolving our problems. They're not actually interested in solving anything for us. They're not interested in that. And yet, they need us to engage in the system in order to legitimize it, right? They need us to be involved in it and at least pretend like it's credible in order for it to have credibility. When it has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. It's become completely unresponsive to us. It doesn't exist, right, in our day-to-day lives, except in a very punitive sort of way. And here in Canada, a really good example of something that's actually beneficial for us is our healthcare system. But to get those sorts of things into place, it requires huge work and huge initiative and huge amounts of effort, which, of course, the capitalist class works to destroy and dismantle, which is exactly what's going on in our province today. So what's shocking to watch, and they know that they need to make sure that people are going to vote for their own destruction. That's the whole point that I'm driving at. They need to convince people to stay connected to this system that is obviously betraying them. A good way that they have done that, you could take a look at Thatcher, right? Thatcher was instrumental in creating a new class of citizen called the taxpayer, right? The taxpayer was an excellent way to divide the working class. It ensured that you created one segment of the working class that was heavily taxed, right? And that section of the working class would be the ones that were responsible for funding the NHS, the ones that were responsible for funding all of these social services. And then you have one group of people who are not paying taxes, right? And you called them entitled, right? So you have taxpayers, and then you have, lazy people who just want to sit around even though they're also working. And they're also of the working class. They're just being exploited by a system of capital. So because you've divided the populace this way, you don't need, most of these quote-unquote democratic systems that exist in the West, you don't need to get majority votes. You just need to get 30% of the 40% of people who show up to vote. In the last provincial election here in Ontario, only 50 to 60% of the populace showed up to vote in the first place. And then of that percentage, only about 30% voted Conservative. So you have a vanishingly small minority of people who even support our leader, but because they're heavily incentivized to go out and vote, i.e. they own a house, right? They are the taxpayer, right? They're extremely easy to organize. They're well organized. They can literally hire people to organize on their behalf, and they do. So it's easy to get these people organized. So this is how you've ended up across the entire Western world with these huge conservative movements. These people who are literally saying out loud in front of your face that the greatest achievement of their life was abandoning the entire populace. Thatcher very famously stood up and said there is no society. Right, as if society is something that you can just deny the existence of. But they deny the existence of the Palestinian genocide. So they can do what they like. Ranger Doomer says, I wonder who banning political discussions benefits. Probably people with the weakest arguments. Just guessing. Yeah. Well, and I think that the capitalists have lost the argument. And I think that the Palestinian genocide really shows that that's the case. They no longer have credibility. They can't actually engage seriously in the argument. The people who they have been funding and the people who they have been backing in order to defend quote-unquote Western civilization, to be the defenders, are more and more looking like insane Nazis and total lunatics. Who are really struggling to keep it together and are really struggling to look anything other than what they are, which are just insane Zionist lunatics, right? Just listen to a Ben Shapiro podcast or a stream for 2 minutes, right? He sounds like a fucking Nazi. He just sounds like a goddamn Nazi, the way he talks. And he gets into that rapid... He might as well be throwing up Zig Heils the entire time, right? Like, he's just a crazy lunatic. And Peterson, right, the guy who was for a moment at a time the golden child, because hierarchies are the most important. We got to defend the hierarchy and make sure that hierarchies are well defended in the society. Well, now he can't have an interview without just going off the handle and losing his mind, right? He's literally screaming at people, right? Like, he's literally screaming at people in an unhinged lunatic manner. He can't keep it. His meds aren't working anymore. Right, they just can't. They can't help him any longer, and so everything's just like coming down around them. And so all they've got left is just banning. That's all they've got left. Just try to not even have the conversation be part of the society. Just create a society that is empty and bereft of these discussions in the first place. Don't let people actually come and find anything, right? So it's just like. Rage or Doomer is an Argentinian. You wake up every day feeling outraged at the fact of who our president is. Yeah. I can't imagine what it must be like I can't imagine what it must be like living in Argentina right now, knowing that this absolute nutball, total loser, right? Like, Milei is like a complete and total loser and an obvious fraud. Like, the guy literally cut... poverty has increased by like 50%. Inflation is up like 200%. He's cut all of these ministries and all these programs. He's got a major strike crisis on his hands. Like, he's obviously incompetent. And in the middle of this, he tried to give himself a raise. Like, the guy is obviously a stooge. He's just a stooge for capital. He puts on a show for his capitalist leaders. His capitalist owners, so that when they tune in to what he's doing, they're like, yeah, he's doing stuff, and he's looking tough, and he's going to be a fighter, and like all this kind of stuff. When all he's doing is just destroying everything to give them money. That's it. With the classic libertarian defense that the best way to build something is to destroy it. That's all. John, what is my top 3 colors? I mean, you got to go with red, right? You got to pick red. And I think it really is as easy as just like red, green, blue, my man. Although I'm a big fan of purple. Big fan of purple, right? So I think I'm going to go with red, green, and purple. That's what I'm going to do. Just the classics. I'm a simple man. Like the socialists were any better? Socialists are always better, dude. Socialists are always better. They're better than libertarians 100%. They're certainly better than liberals and conservatives, right? Just by the raw numbers, that's true, right? Like, and to pretend like Milei is like on the same level as these guys, like, it's embarrassing, right? It's just like the most embarrassing shit ever. Yeah, red, green, blue. Yeah, gotta have the 3 that make up all the rest. There you go, methane. Subverting the system, right? Subverting the system. I imagine it's unbearable, Ranger Doomer. Like, I imagine it's unbearable. Oof. Okay, now Milo's lying down. He's lying down. Good for you, Milo. You did it. You did it. Like, we're in the middle of this major housing crisis, and there's still people coming in and pretending like everything's fine. Right? Colleen Kavanaugh. I don't know if I've ever seen you here before, Colleen Kavanaugh. Glad to see you. Hope you're doing well out in the world. What are your thoughts on the NDP? I mean, when they first got started, they were a socialist organization that was actually interested in socialist ideas. They were instrumental in getting healthcare passed. I think without them, you wouldn't have actually gotten healthcare passed. Tommy Douglas was the premier who was in power in Saskatchewan when healthcare was put in, when the universal healthcare system was put in Saskatchewan. It was a resounding success. He proved it was cheaper to implement. It became very popular. It became a plank for his platform. And it essentially forced the liberals' hands because they knew, because they knew that if they didn't actually pass healthcare reform, they would lose and the NDP would take power. And that would be very dangerous for capitalists. It'd be very dangerous for capitalists to come for a socialist organization to come into power and actually force them to do stuff on behalf of the populace. And so the passage of healthcare was a concession by capital, right? And it was a concession that was forced upon them by the NDP. Since then, then you went through Jack Layton, and near as I can tell, Jack Layton was like a well-meaning liberal, right? Like he seemed to do things for the benefit of his people. Like you can point at like how many houses were built. It seemed like if he had have taken power, it would have meant the capitalists would have had to negotiate with like not a straight socialist, but like a Keynesian economic a guy, somebody who actually was like, you have enough money, like you've got $1 billion, it's fine. And now they're just an empty husk of nothing, right? They exist primarily to put on like fake opposition. That's what they're really there for. They're controlled opposition from the left, so that as power begins to diffuse from the electoral system and from the conservatives and from the liberals generally, the electorate will turn to an organization and be like, please save us from this ridiculous hellhole that we find ourselves in. Oh my goodness. And the NDP will be there to be like, yeah, we're going to raise taxes on these guys by 0.2% over 10 years. And that'll fix it. So they're just controlled opposition. They're essentially a new liberal party now. That right now you have like a conservative party that is unhinged completely. Climate change denialists. Their solutions are to destroy the society. So they're just like far right on the spectrum. They're lunatics. They've lost their minds. Any concept of like even like a Harperite, like the Harper conservatives were still like not they weren't far right, but they were firmly entrenched on the right. But they weren't lunatics, right? Now the right is like just like this lunatic organization of just like, they don't care about evidence, they don't care about the fact that things are cheaper. I think that's the big thing that really kills me about today's modern day conservatives and capitalists generally. Like the thing that really made me turn the corner, really made me turn the corner and recognize and realize that capitalists are psychopaths was the moment when I recognized and realized that almost every policy would be cheaper to implement to make it a universalized system. That if you just gave everybody access to the system, it would be cheaper to implement. And that's true for almost everything, right? With very, very minor exceptions. And those minor exceptions are literally things like distributing Xboxes. And even then, but if you want to have a universal healthcare system, it's cheaper than a private system. If you want to eliminate poverty, a basic income is cheaper. Like every system that comes out of the left is just cheaper, it's more efficient, and it actually solves the problem. And why doesn't the right want to do it? Because they have this kooky, weird ideology where they're worshiping money, and they admire the suffering of humanity. Like that's really what it is now. And the system of capital is going to defend itself, right? These lunatic, fringe, religious fundamentalists are going to defend themselves. And the way that they defend themselves is that they buy out the political system, because politicians are cheap. They're really cheap. The conservatives are outright bought. The liberals are bought as well, but their role in the game is to act as they're the ones that are the natural ruling party. They're the ones that sit there and go, we'll give you a minor concession. Here's the minor concession, everybody. So take your 0.2% over 10 years kind of stuff. But now the liberals don't even do that, right? The best that we get out of today's modern liberals is like, man, that'd be a great idea. That's what today's liberals do. They stand up and be like, wow, there's an idea that's coming out of the left for how to solve that problem. What a great idea. And then they don't do it. And they just do nothing. Right? That's today's modern liberal party. And so that's left space on the left for a new liberal party, and that's the NDP. They used to be socialist. They're not anymore. And they stand up and they do what the liberals do. They say, hey, we've got a great idea that we'll never implement because we work for capitalists. Right? So they're a capitalist party that exists to funnel energy into the dead-end electoral system that no longer responds to the needs of the electorate. That's what the NDP is all about. This is not to say, like, I still think that people should participate in electoral politics to the degree that it matters, which is almost nothing. So, sure, go and vote. Take an hour out of your day and go and vote in your local kind of district. But that's not politics, and it's not really, like, it's politics to the same degree that, like, the WWE is politics, if you understand me. That, like, when the $1 Million Man comes out and we all go boo, right? That's politics. There's politics there, sure, right? But it's not actually politics. It has nothing to do with politics, right? Like, not in a serious way, not in a real way. And that's the same thing with our electoral system. So go engage in the system of WWE, right? Put your vote behind the, NDP capitalist candidate to show the capitalists that you're dissatisfied with the conservative capitalists and the liberal capitalists. But don't fool yourself into what you're doing, right? Like, just try to throw as many wrenches as you can into the system. But if you're sitting there being like, we'll vote for the NDP and the NDP will come in and solve all these problems and yeehaw, we'll get it done. No, that's not their role. That's not what they do. That's not how they operate in the system. That's not their job. Their job is to maintain the system of capital and to make sure that you stay connected to the system, the failed system of electoral politics that exists in the West, in order to keep you politically inert. That's the goal. Because if you believe that being political means just going and voting once every 4 years and maybe like following the news, and that's being political, and you think that's the beginning and end of politics, then that's great. You're politically inert. You're not a threat. You've done nothing valuable, right? You're not important to the system. You don't matter. And as long as you stay that way, then they're fine with that, right? Just vote for the capitalist with the color that you like, and that'll do it. Kaz asks, what do I think about the French language's future in Canada? I mean, Quebec is always threatening separation, and Quebec is, I mean, it comes down to Quebec, and Quebec is fairly protective of the French language. So I think French will stick around, because Quebec is French, right? It's not going to change. And you take a look at France. France is the same way. They're very protectionist of their language, right? Like, the French have a different attitude when it comes towards language. Like, the English language is a mercenary language. We have no rules. It's like a free market, and so we just like absorb whatever and take whatever into the language that we can and use it willy-nilly. Who cares, right? That's how you end up with fun little moments like the French don't have a word for entrepreneur, and they don't care. Right? They don't, but nobody cares, right? You just take whatever word you want, you use it for whatever you want. You can make literally figuratively and figuratively literally. It doesn't matter, right? Whereas the French are like, no, we have a language. This is the language. You can't just introduce stuff to it. No, too bad. Like, they have an institution in France, the French Academy, that exists explicitly to say, this is French. We are gatekeepers. If you introduce a word into the French language and you try to put it on TV in France, we will file papers. We will make it a problem for you. And they do. So when you have a protectionist institution whose job it is to maintain the language, it's very difficult to get rid of that language. So I think that the French language's future in Canada is it's not going to go away. Colleen writes, I'm in Ontario also, and I find it frustrating that there is no viable option to vote for on the left, and the the electorate votes against their own interest. Well, the electorate can't vote against for their own interest, right? That's what's important to understand. So I think that you need to free yourself of the frustration that the electorate is voting against its own interests. The electorate cannot vote for its own interests. The system of capital will not allow them to vote for their own interests, because the electorate's own interests is like the ownership of their business that they work in, right? The electorate's own interest is like actual stakeholding, community building, all of the things that capitalists don't want to see. Capitalists don't want to see a unified, aware, socially conscious people who are actually implementing policies to benefit themselves. That's not what capitalists want to see. Capitalists want to see subservient people who are too stupid to understand what's happening to them, right? And they've widely achieved that, by the way. Like, people are more or less of the mind that this is just life. This is how it has to be. There can be nothing else. When the reality is like, if we all suddenly had a little moment of like, bing, wait a minute, we can just take these places over. We literally can just take these places over and we can just run them. Well, why do we have a boss? What are you talking about? Wait, hold on a second. We all work, every single one of us works in top-down tyrannies. These are fanatical, tyrannical dictatorships to an individual. Every business that you work in is structured to be the most bleak, dark, technocratic, evil, demonic, tyrannical dictatorship you've ever thought of in your imagination. They're all structured that way. Every single one of them. And then on top of that is this little tiny layer of what they call democracy that we're all supposed to look at and be like, aha, because the tyrannical dictatorships that we all work in and live in, that we all subserviate ourselves to in order to get food and shelter, because these tyrannical dictatorships have erected at the very top of the system a method for the tyrannical dictatorships to negotiate with one another on how to subserviate the serfs, that's a democracy. Ha 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 ha. If we all collectively understood that all at once and said we refuse to operate this way anymore, these businesses are ours, we are going to have voters' councils within these businesses, we are going to democratize these businesses, we are going to turn them into co-ops, and if you try to stop us, we will fight back. Right? If we all said that, that's what would happen. So the system of capital needs to make sure that we're too stupid to do it. They need to make sure that we're too scared. They need to make sure that we're too illiterate. They need to make sure that we're too dumb. They need to make sure that we're scared of our fellow man and our neighbors. Right? They need to make sure that the society is in constant disarray, constantly disorganized, constantly exhausted, constantly in chaos. Because if the society actually was like calm, stable, and safe, well, the first thing everybody would do is they would go, wait a minute, whoa, who cares what this guy... I've never even met this guy. Like, all of these tyrannical dictatorships we call businesses are owned by people you've never met. Right? Be gone. But we're not a very intelligent people. I've come to realize. Like, we're more or less okay with living in a fascist, oppressive situation as long as you get to buy a case of beer on the weekend. That's more or less been the truth the entire time. And but the thing that really tells you that right now we're being ruled by like dimwits. The people who are in power are not only psychopaths, but they're also extraordinarily dumb. And the reason why you know that is because of what's going on in the housing market. Like, destabilizing your housing market, it's just a dumb thing to do, right? You don't also need to destabilize your housing market, right? Destabilizing the society and creating chaos in the society and turning people against one another and making sure that there are wedges and divides in the populace and in the society is enough, right? That's enough to keep people in a state of disarray. You don't also need to threaten them with constant homelessness. You don't also need to withhold from an entire generation home ownership. You don't need to do that, but they're going to, because they're psychopaths and they can't help themselves, right? If they can earn a penny while throwing you into the street, they'll do it. And the NDP is not going to come and save you, right? They're not interested. They work for capitalists, and they know who's going to bread their butter, right? They're not interested in a big fight against the capital order, right? They'll bend the knee, and they exist in order to do so. So at this stage in the game, it's not about looking to the electoral systems with this kind of doe-eyed, wide-eyed naivete and hoping that, oh gosh and golly, maybe somebody will come into power and something good will happen, because that's not going to happen, right? We live in a corpse. We're just watching it decay. That's all. So the thing to be doing now is not to continuously put hope into this, that maybe the corpse will get up and start moving around, right? Like maybe life will come to the corpse. No, it's about tearing that corpse apart as best you can and using its pieces in order to build something new in your own life. That we need to be building parallel systems that operate outside the system of capital, parallel systems of mutual aid, parallel systems that don't invest themselves into the system of capital at all. And it's the only thing we have left. Literally the only thing we have left. Like, at this stage in the game, planting a garden is the most revolutionary act that you can do. Right? Seeking food independence for you and your neighbors is an act of major revolution. Creating systems of mutual aid so that if somebody gets into trouble, or if somebody needs to crash on a couch somewhere, or if somebody just needs to borrow a bike or something, right? So, and when I say creating systems of mutual aid, what I really mean, right? What I dead ass mean in the biggest possible way is knock on your neighbor's door, talk to them, know their name, say, hey, you have this concern, I too also have this concern. Maybe we can join forces to a degree. And if you have any problems, right, don't hesitate to help, and like we can help one another, right? Try to build organizations that exists explicitly so that people can stand up and say, hey, I'm having this problem. Can anyone help? And someone in that community will likely go, yeah, I could probably help with that. Sure, yeah. Like, we need to be building real communities, because our communities are dead. Like, our communities are dead. And because we live in a dead corpse of a society. We're not like, if we continue down the path that we're continuing down now, we're all just going to remain isolated in tiny little boxes, separated from one another until the whole thing blows up. So it's time to abandon the society back. It's time to abandon the capitalist class back, because it's already abandoned you, right? It's already abandoned you. Well, we've got a fellow named John, good strong name John, on TikTok, who has donated a whole bunch of roses. That's nice. That's nice, my man. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. John, do you know anyone selling tent insurance? There's a good chance I might get rent evicted in the next 8 months. Yeah, Jesus Christ, dude. I'm so sorry to hear that. Right? I'm so sorry to hear that, my man. Because, like, that to me is the big terror, right? That's the big terror. It's just like a landlord coming in and being like, oh, I can just change I could just take that shelf out, put in a new shelf, and then I can double the rent. Right? And they can. That's legal. Right? It's perfectly legal for them to do that. My advice to you, bud, DM, is to just, like, dig your heels in and like really fight it. Because, like, what they want to do is they want to buy you out. That's what they want. So if you do get evicted, right, like, put up a big fuss, try to get a year's rent. And I'm not joking. Try to get a year's rent. Like, negotiate for getting 12 months of rent. Like, it's because you'll probably get it. Methane writes, "Oh God, Methane, I'm so sorry for you. I'm so sorry that you're experiencing that firsthand. I've recently realized my brother thinks Polyev is going to save Canada. I'm not sure I can dissuade it of him either." Yeah, I do think it is at this point that we need to actually have a very, very serious conversation about emotion. A very, very serious conversation about emotion. That we are no longer operating in the realm of rationality. That we are no longer interested in having these discussions using evidence. Right? Maple MAGA is here. Yep. I think that people are primarily operating through emotion. That the energy isn't hitting their brain. Right? That the energy is originating in the base. Right? It's originating in the base, which is where it originates, and then it's going up. Right? And it's coming out of their mouth. But it's not. None of the energy is actually hitting here. Right? So they're not actually responding rationally. Which makes sense, right? People's entire lives have been destabilized, right? They live in this state of destabilization. And if you are destabilized, then you are, then bad energy is coming out of you, and bad energy is coming up, and bad things, right? Oh yeah, Colleen. Well, Colleen, thank you for your comment. Thank you for your thoughtful replies. Your passion is inspiring. I've been feeling so helpless and hopeless about it all. Oh, yeah. Colleen, look. The reason why I do this live stream, okay, is for, number one, my own mental stability, my own mental... This is a place where I place all my darkness. I don't have these conversations out in the real world. I used to. People didn't like it, and so I've created this space so that I could do it, and you guys come and watch it happen. So, and I think we're all here in order to have catharsis with one another, so that this is where the dark energy goes. This is where our fears go. This is where we air our great concerns, but it's also where we find the truth. It's also where we find the truth so that we're no longer living in this sort of dim-witted space, right? We're no longer living in this space of denial or false hope or any of those sorts of things. That in many ways what we're all doing collectively here is we are grieving, we're dealing with our emotional selves, and we're grieving with one another. We're grieving the death of our society. We're grieving the death of our expectations. We're resetting our expectations. We're grieving the death of the story we were sold. None of us thought our lives were going to go this way. And so we're grieving the death of that life that we envisioned for ourselves, right? And the faster you get over it, the faster you get through that process of grief and get to the other side of it, which is acceptance, the better off you're going to be. You're going to be a lot better off. I can tell you very cleanly for myself, when I'm operating out in the world, living this in this capitalist environment, going around in the world, talking to people, all of this kind of stuff, because I've accepted what is happening in our society, and I've accepted that it's not going to stop. I've accepted that we are in a decline. I've accepted that all of this is happening, right? My life is much better. Much, 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 much better. When I'm talking to people who are living in despair, when I'm dealing with people who are living in homelessness, when I'm dealing with customers who are experiencing the absolute absurdity of this reality, right? And my objective is to make their lives better for the brief, fleeting moment that I have to connect with them. Just the littlest, tiniest, fractional moment that they're in my life and then out of it. My objective is to ensure that they have the best possible time for that fractional moment that I have them for. Because, and that's all I can do, right? Because that's the position that I'm in, and I can't do anything other than that. But if I were still dealing with my grief, right? We've all seen this. right? We've all walked into an establishment and there's somebody and they just hate themselves and they hate everything around them and they're like a little storm cloud that's walking around being terrible, right? We've seen that person. Well, that's a person who hasn't dealt with their grief. They thought their life was going to be different. They thought that things were going to be different because they were promised a different story. They were told that things were going to be different, that all they had to do is work really hard, put it in, nose to the grindstone, and everything would work out for them. And also many of them for a long time, like decade at least, were told that if they didn't make it happen, it's because they were a failure. And a lot of them believed it. Imagine walking around the world believing that you're a failure. Imagine walking around the world actually buying into the idea that the reason why you're not where you were told you were supposed to be is because it's your fault. When there are these massive, enormous hierarchical systems designed to impoverish you and destroy you, right? So, quite seriously, take the process of grieving seriously. Go through the process of grieving. Cry about it, wail about it, throw rocks at it, write poems about it, write songs about it, make literature for yourself and no one else. Talk to God. Who cares? Get strip naked and become a witch in the woods, right? Do whatever it is you need to do to make it through to the other side of grief, so that you can turn and look at this society the way that I look at this society, which is, what a bunch of fucking losers these guys are. What a dumb loser society full of total loser babies. And when I get to the end of my life, I'm just going to go like this. Bye-bye, loser society. And I'm going to go meet my creator. And I'm just going to be like, man, those guys did not have their shit together. I can't imagine. Radio, I worry about you, man. Can't you just crank your audio up? I don't want to crank my audio up because I worry I'm going to blow everybody's eardrums out. Yeah, grief is an accurate word to describe what I feel for my country. Yeah, we're all going through it. The Western world is going through a period of pretty major grief, right? Like, what are the 5 stages of grief? Like, what are they, right? Grief is, first you have denial, right? So there's your flat earthers, there's your climate change denialists, there's your capitalist apologists, right? All of these people that are pretending like everything is totally fine, right? They're living in denial. And for those of us who make it through denial, those people are very frustrating, right? Because we want them to no longer be in denial. But they are in denial, right? They're in denial. And it's a highly emotional state of being. It's a highly emotional state of existence. That they exist in this heightened emotional state where they actually genuinely believe that everything's totally fine, it's just a you problem, right? Doesn't matter if millions upon millions upon millions of people are telling them. Doesn't matter if there's massive despair. Doesn't matter that there's all this militarism, that the climate change apocalypse is literally upon us. None of this matters to them because they're just living in a state of denialism because ignorance is bliss. They care more about their personal happiness than they care about your life, right? And that's where they want to be, and so that's where they're going to stay. Well, if you want to grow up and you want to live and exist in the world in a grown-up way, right, which you do, and I know you do, because you're no longer willing to live in a state of denialism. You're no longer willing to sit there and be a denialist. You're no longer willing to actually say out loud in front of anybody that everything's hunky-dory, right? You're no longer willing to pretend. You're no longer willing to create that mask. And that tells me that you're willing to grow up and you're willing to get on with this whole thing. And so what's the next stage, right? Well, so it's denialism, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And it's not necessarily in that order. right? It's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing. Those are just the 5 sections of it. Well, I know for myself, I've gone through a pretty massive depression, and it sounds like many of you are also in that state, right, of depression. And we've all seen the people who are in anger about it, right? A lot of the right-wing reactionism that you're seeing is because of that anger, right? You see like the PPC crowd and the libertarian crowd no longer willing to live in denial. There's a problem, right? There's a problem. They admit that there's a problem, and so they're taking that and they're making anger. Anger is the thing for them, and they're going doing January 6ths and doing all kinds of stuff, right? They're going and causing problems and destroying stuff, right? They're speaking the revolutionary language and language of overthrow and the destruction of the government and all this kind of stuff, right? That's anger. It's not rational, right? And we can tell the libertarians are not living in a rational space. Because if they were, they would, think it through one more step and be like, oh, this is feudalism. That's what we're arguing for. This is feudalism. You can see bargaining in the climate change discussion, right? Net zero. We'll cut carbon emissions here, but we'll do this over here. We'll keep polluting here. We'll cut carbon emissions here. It'll create net zero, right? As if that's an actual, real, legitimate solution. Right? These guys believe that they can negotiate with the sun. As if the sun will be like, oh, okay. Yeah, oh, yeah, sure, I see where you're coming from. You're right, I'll just give you an extra couple of days, right, to get your shit together. So what's important for you, right? And Methane, you're talking about it, right? Yeah. Isaac's talking about it. Colleen's, you're talking about it. Right, is to see in yourself where you are on that journey, and incidentally, it's not a brush it off and you're done, right? Oh, I'm finished with depression now. I went through the depression phase. I'm over that. That's done now, right? No. No. What it is, it's about including in the medley of your emotional states when it comes to the subject of grief, it's about including acceptance. It's about practicing acceptance. That's what it is. It's not about letting go of your anger or your depression. It's not about not considering bargaining. It's not about not being skeptical or any of these kinds of things. But it's about allowing acceptance in and saying to yourself, you know what? I can accept that all of this is okay. And I can believe that all of this is okay. And I can get myself into a mindset and get myself into a state of being and get myself into a thinking pattern and a thought pattern that says all of this is in hand, all of this is actually okay, and I can live my life outside of the despair. And you're not always going to win. You're not always going to achieve it. You're not always going to be able to calm your anger. You're not always going to be able to make it out of bed. You're not always going to be able to do that. But if you don't think you can, then you won't. And if you don't say to yourself, I can accept this. This is okay. That there are forces wildly beyond myself and my own comprehension. And that my own life is not the end of all things. And if you can get these thinking patterns into the way that you think about things, then you end up with good days. You end up with good days. And I think that that's the truth. And that, to me, should be the goal for all of us. Because, look, here's the hard truth, okay? Some hard truth times. To put you back into depression. Look, if we stop polluting right now, if we cut all emissions right now, we're still hitting 4 degrees by the end of the century. Right? That's enough to destroy a lot A lot. That's going to destroy a lot. That's millions of people at least dying. It's an enormous, major, intense human catastrophe, and that's if we stop producing emissions today, right now, full stop. Okay? So that gives you a choice. You can either allow that information to break you, and that information does break people, right? Like people who have flat earther brain, people who are walking around in that state of denialism, people who refuse to acknowledge that there's a problem, that it's a hoax by the Chinese, and that NASA is in the pocket of big climate change, that all of these climate scientists are actually in on it, and it's a global conspiracy, right? But the moon landing was fake, and the Earth is actually flat, right? Because that information can break your fucking brain. It's too much for people. Like, I genuinely think that there are people out there that if they were to suddenly accept that information, they would have to go on, like, vision quests and shit. They'd literally, like, become wandering hobos, right? They just lose connection to the material reality around them. And see the fraudulence and the falseness of this material creation of capital that are around them, because a society that is producing those kinds of outcomes has no credibility and has produced nothing that has any value to anyone. So it's just easier to be like, nah, Chinese hoax, time to go to work. Chinese hoax. Right? Because I think it breaks them. Or very simply they can't confront it. And then you end up with bargaining, right? Where people are like, okay, fine, so it's a problem, but we're dealing with it. We'll just adapt to it. Everything's fine, don't worry about it. They don't want to grow up. Because it's hard. It's painful. It's difficult. And I think that's something for everybody to understand. Is that it's called growing pains for a reason. So if you're in pain, it's because you're growing. If you're in that state of depression, it's because you're in a state of growing and you're struggling with something. You're fighting with something and you're trying to find your path through. You're trying to break through to the other side. You're trying to make it happen, right? That if you weren't feeling that pain and you were just existing blissfully in the society around you, then you would basically be stagnated. You wouldn't be going anywhere or doing anything or being anything, right? Yeah, Ranger Doomer, I'm going to be dead anyway. I have no children, nor want to have any. I'll let the poor bastards that are still around to deal with it. Yeah, I tried to help. That's how I basically view my life, right? I cut my emissions the best I could. I participated in the death cult as little as I possibly could. I didn't have any children. I consider that to be a major success, that I didn't just blindly walk into spawning children into the apocalypse. Although I think that the people who did have children, I think that there are greater forces at work, if you understand what I mean by that. The biological drive to reproduce supersedes any ideology you can possibly create. So I think that we shouldn't look down on people who did have children. I'm gonna be really clear about that. Because I worry that there is this sort of propensity to create like a moral high ground kind of argument. Be like, oh, I didn't have any children. Ha ha ha, I'm better. Right? To sort of guilt people who did have children. It's like, no. The people who have children are doing so because they like need to have children. Like, I've met these people. I know these people. Like they for them, it wasn't a choice. They were just like, we're having children. Do you not want children? Goodbye. Hello, do you want to have children? I want to have children. Do you want to have children? Yes, I would like to have children. Children. And that's their that drove them, right? And I think that impulse and that desire and that energy supersedes any kind of rational conversation that you can have, right? People are going to have children. They're just going to have children. So it's and we have no, like, we're not soothsayers, like, we're not prophets, right? We have no comprehension of what the future is actually going to look like, and this next generation, these next generation of kids are going to be like, yes, they're going to face like enormous difficulties and enormous challenges, but we might very well be that old generation that looks at the young kids with shock and awe and surprise. We might be those 80-year-olds and those 90-year-olds. Much in the same way that, like, my grandma, when she looked at the internet and when she looked at what we were doing with technology, she had no idea what the fuck she was looking at. And moreover, there was no way she ever was going to. Like, she took one look at it. I remember one day I sat down with her and just tried to get her to go on Facebook and try to do Facebook. And she was like, no thanks. Like, that's not happening. It was beyond her. Well, this next generation of kids and these next generation of kids that are coming up, they might be doing stuff and might be engaging in stuff that we just look at and we go, I have no idea what you're even talking about or what you're even doing. And it might go that way, right? And that's why I never dismiss whatever the kids get up to and whatever they think is cool. I never dismiss them for it. I think that's got to be one of the dumbest things that people do. That kids think it's popular. It's terrible. It's awful. The new technology is awful just because kids like it. Yeah. Probably not. Probably not. Right? Probably not. This happens every single time I get on TikTok, man. I get like 3,000 likes, which I have, but I only get like 2 people watching. Right? And it happens every single time. I'll get like 3,000 likes. I'll have 100 people watching the channel. And then I'll say one thing that triggers the algorithm, and then everybody dumps out. It's like observable at this point. It's like so hilarious how observable it actually is. Yeah, I mean, kids for me, I always knew that I was going to be something of a wanderer, and I was always going to be pursuing something deeper. Like, I always intrinsically understood that the reality that we are looking at is fake. Like, it's a projection, and it's not real. That it is just a method for creation to talk to itself. But it doesn't really know what's going on either. So we're all trying to piece it together, but we're doing it very badly. Because there's a lot of different factors and there's a lot of different stuff, and we're easily distractible. It's really easy to distract us from really basic, like, hey, what are you doing here, do you think? Like, what do you think all this is? What do you think reality is? Like, what do you think? What do you think we're here for? Like, we have consciousness and awareness, and we're here on this plane of reality that we're randomly generated into, in a randomly generated spot on a randomly generated planet. And the thing is vast and infinite, and we don't know anything about it. And instead of actually sitting down and looking at one another and be like, what? Like, what? Like, what are you even talking about? What are you even talking about? We're just randomly generated into some kind of reality, and we're just supposed to accept that. And just be like, well, here I am. I guess I'm supposed to go to work now. Dope, 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 dope. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about that I'm supposed to wake up, go to a place that I hate to go to, do nothing that's important whatsoever for people who do not care about me, and then turn around, go home, go to sleep, wake up, do it again, and that's your life? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, there's there's this enormous, huge, vast, never-ending reality that exists directly in front of you now and then directly inside of you. That out of you is this enormous array of crazy vastness for you to look at and explore and learn, to grab hold of whatever entices you and whatever takes your interest, which the capitalists work as hard as possible to beat out of you, and to ensure that you never pursue that outside of whatever's valuable for them. They don't want you to know your history. They don't want you to know economics. They don't want you to know anything about what's happened. Because if you knew that, you'd immediately be like, well, these guys are psychos. That's really obvious. So not only does that journey exist, this infinite learning and this infinite exploration, and this infinite curiosity and this infinite ability to grab hold of anything that catches your eye and just pursue that. If there was a person in this reality and all they were about was stamps, they were just like, yeah, I've got rooms full of stamps. Check out this stamp. Look at this stamp. This stamp's really cool. I love this stamp. Here's the history of this stamp. This stamp came from this place, right? And if that's what that guy did for his whole life and then he died, well done. Good for you, dude. You were the stamp guy. Everybody has these kinds of inclinations, and the system of capital does everything it can to beat it out of you, to make you feel guilty about it, to make you feel bad about it, to make you feel stupid about it, to make you feel like it's not worthwhile. How are you going to sell that? How are you going to make any money from that? How are you going to do anything? Why is that important? Who cares about that? Right? Well, the truth is that you care about it, and that's good enough. So if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, man, I'd really love to do X, Y, and Z, well then, goddamn it, just fucking do it. Just do it. Because you wanting to do it is enough. That's worthwhile in and of itself. And it should be pursued simply because you want to pursue it. Right? And that's just the external journey. Right? That's just the exploration of the external reality. That's just you exploring the projection, in the hopes that the exploration of the projection will lead to a deeper understanding of what lies beneath it. That you might actually dig deep enough into the projection to find the projector. And that's just one part of it. And then there's this second part of it where you can go in the other way. And you could close your eyes and just look what's going on inside of you. And when you actually dive deep inside of you, you realize, oh, infinity is down there. There is no bottom to that. You can just delve down like it's a mine shaft and just spend your whole life sitting in the corner exploring the internal self, which is a vast, infinite ocean for which there is no end. Like, what? And nobody is actually genuinely saying out loud in front of everybody, yeah, that's what life's about. Like, that's pretty clearly what we're supposed to be doing, right? Like, what are you going to do after you graduate from school? Really is, what job for capitalists are you going to do? When there's this, like, enormous story happening. This enormous, never-ending, constantly in front of you journey, and constantly within you journey, that you have this brilliant opportunity. You have this brilliant, beautiful, infinite opportunity to explore some kind of endless mystery that we all get to partake in and we all get to participate, and we all are collectively ignoring it. And why are we collectively ignoring it? Because it doesn't make some cocksucker rich. It doesn't make Bill Gates any money. Like, I've said it on this channel before, and I will say it again, and I will say it until the day I die. We would be better off as a people if we all walked into fields, walked onto beaches, walked into the woods, laid down and stared at the sky. And that was the entirety of our lives. Do the absolute bare minimum of labor to create food, Do the absolute bare minimum to maintain shelter, and then all of your productive hours are spent sitting on your ass staring at the sky. And we'd all be better off for it. Our society would be better. There'd be less psychopaths in the society. We wouldn't be doing these crazy bombing campaigns everywhere. We wouldn't be destroying everything for no fucking reason whatsoever. There'd be no climate change apocalypse. We would be better off for it. We would know more. We would care more. We would love more. We'd have more time to get to know each other. We'd have more time to talk to one another. We'd have more time to understand one another. We'd have more time to deal with all this kind of stuff. But instead, gotta go to that place I hate to do that thing that doesn't matter. Why? Why? Like, give me one good goddamn reason why. Like, it's just so fucking insane. It's this obvious insanity that's overtaken us. It's this obvious insanity that has me exploring the reality that humans can be taken over by their emotional selves. Humans are emotional creatures first and foremost. And it's the people who are walking around pretending like they're not who are in the thrall of their emotional selves the most. The facts don't care about your feelings crowd are the most hysterically emotional people you've ever met in your life. If we don't make the attempt to actually address those emotions, and if we don't actually talk about our emotional selves, and if we don't actually talk about how you can just be swept away in a zeitgeist of emotions and in a hysteria, if you don't actually acknowledge that that's real and that can happen to you, then you're always just going to be in the thrall of it. You're going to be reactive by your very nature. You're going to be a reactionary by the truest definition of it. Something will happen and you will simply react to it. And you won't live a real, actual existence. You won't actually project yourself into the world around you, actually, because you're just waiting for stuff to happen so that you can react to it and you can be emotional to it. Right? And these emotions, right? And I feel like we could talk about them. And we should talk about them. That's what this poster behind me all is. Right? It's about dealing with your emotional self and coming to terms with your emotions so that you can actually acknowledge that they're happening and then put them aside and move into the world with clarity. Right? And it's just so odd at this stage in the game because there's a lot of people walking around saying, well, what are we supposed to do? It's not about doing. Right? It's about undoing. It's about undoing. It's about doing less. It's about doing nothing. It's about participating less. Like, this is like the true reality of this is that the events of what's going on are being driven by a small group of psychopaths at the top of it. That these people are the enemies of humanity. Like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, right? The richest people in the society, organizations like BlackRock. These people are the enemies of humanity. And these people are primarily driven by an emotional drive to consume more. That they are seeking their meaning, right? They're finding their meaning in reality through this mass consumption, through this idea that just consuming more and building more and having more and doing amazing things and creating great stuff. Like that's what meaning is, and that's what reality is. And of course they're good people. Look at the things they've done. Like Oppenheimer built a nuclear bomb. Does that make him a good person? Does that mean that he has the most meaning? It was a great thing that he did. Right? It took a lot of energy. right? So for anybody who's out there, who's listening, who says, what can I do? How should I act? I feel so helpless or hopeless. You don't have to do a goddamn thing. Like I think it's time we all kind of come to realize that. Right? Like, we don't have to do a goddamn thing. In fact, the less we do, the better. Like, the system thrives on productivity. The system requires constant labor and productivity. It needs that. So withhold it. Don't do it. That's why they've built in these systems to shame you. That's why they've built in these systems to mock you and ridicule you and pretend as though you're not a real man unless you have a Bugatti and all this kind of nonsense that exists in our culture and our society today. Well, look what it's getting us, right? The birthright's in the toilet. Everyone's exhausted, angry. Everyone's frustrated. No one knows where to turn or what to do. And the truth is just like, go to the beach. Just go to the beach. Chill out. Don't worry about it. Like, your life is yours. Your life is yours. And whatever you want to do with it, and whatever you want to experience with it, or however you want to be in it, then just do it. I'm like, that's just the long and short of it. That you are part of a vast system of creation. You are your creator attempting to discover itself. And every experience you have and every joyful moment you experience with the force that created you. I can't think of a better thing to do. I can't think of a better way to live. I can't think of a better way to honor the birth, your birth, and the birth of humanity. To live in a state of being that is pleasant and enjoyable, full of contentment. I can't think of a better thing to do. I can't think of a better rebellion against the system of capital than that. That when the salesmen show up to sell you a product, you just say, no thank you. I'm happier without it. Yeah, John, I'm surrounded by people who believe continuing to go to work is the only thing that makes sense. Yeah. Like, the system of capital programs people. It's a programming system, right? And it's very robust, and it's very effective. And humans can be programmed, right? Like, from the day that you are born, you are programmed into this belief system that says the only thing that has any value is going to work for a system of capital, making money for someone else, right? And it starts right away. I actually make the argument that the Santa Claus story, the Santa Claus lie, is part of this. Like, it starts that early. And you can call it something other than this, like the Jesus Christ lie, if you like, or the Easter Bunny lie, right? But just the fundamental idea is that there is an invisible creature who exists somewhere that if you do something for them, you're going to get rewarded. And then moreover, everybody understands that eventually this kid is going to find out that this is a lie. So this lie has several positive impacts for the system of capital. Number one, it gets kids hyper-focused on materialistic gain. Number two, it trains them to fall into patterns of behavioral change for material gain. And number three, it intrinsically trains them that the system is going to lie to them. It intrinsically trains them that the system is going to lie to them and that they have to be okay with that. Right? No kid, when they find out about the Santa Claus lie, holds it against their parent forever, right? Maybe they're upset for a minute. But then, finally, the reason why they're not upset, this is the final nail in the coffin and the real reason why the Santa Claus lie is so effective, is that the lie was always for your benefit, right? The lie existed to benefit you. No, there's no man out in the North Pole making toys with little elves. It was a lie. It was a lie we told you for fun, to train you, so that you would act nicer, to think about your behavior, to think about how you're going in for bribes, for material gain. And we did it so that you would get presents, and you did get presents. Isn't that nice? So we lied to you for your benefit. So you better be grateful. And so you have a bunch of kids that internalize this. That you're going to get lied to, but it's for your benefit. So just go along with it. Continue perpetrating the lie. Continue spreading the lie. Don't spoil the lie. And right about the time they start to be able to figure out that this huge, enormous cultural lie. There's television commercials, there's advertisements, there's full-scale films about this lie that have penetrated the society. As soon as the kid is getting about old enough so that they recognize that this is a lie, they're already in school, right? They're already being deposited in a place by their parents, who as far as they're concerned are gods, and being told, sit in this room, take in this information. These people are your owners and your controllers. You have to do whatever they tell you to do. You have to learn whatever they teach you, and whatever they teach you is true. Certainly no Western propaganda or capitalist propaganda within the system of education. And they take 12 years to teach you something they could teach you in 2. The reason why they need to get you in that room for 12 years is to really instill inside of you that your life is like this. This is your life. Your life is go to a place you hate, to discuss something that is irrelevant, for the benefit of people you don't really know, and just accept that that's what it is, and accept that it's for your benefit. Just like the Santa Claus lie. This is all for your benefit. Sure, it's horrible. Sure, it's tedious. Sure, you dislike it. Sure, it's happening right when you're having the big puberty moment. Right? Sure. No, we're not going to talk to you about sex. No, we're not going to talk to you about the realities of what it means to be a sexual creature in the world. No, we're not going to have serious discussions about that. We're going to have you sit in a room and deal with it. With other people who are also dealing with it. And this is called socializing them, by the way. And so, the entire time you're going through that system of education, you're being graded. Right? And liars and frauds, like Peterson, say that you're being graded on your competency. That's not what you're being graded on. Right? To a small degree, I suppose competency matters. But what matters more significantly more, is your willingness to do it. That it doesn't matter how insipid or pathetic or stupid the task is. It doesn't matter how ridiculous or childish or mundane or boring or uninteresting or stupid the task is. What matters is that you do it. That you are graded on your ability to do what you are told. We got a fellow in Twitch saying fire, blood, and ice who says you're being graded on your ability to regurgitate what you've been told. Yeah, if that's the task. Do what you're told. That's the goal. And if you do what you're told very well, you get an A. And if you do what you're told very badly, well, you fail. So they've created a system of vetting that rewards obedience and punishes dissension. And it's called the education system. Then if they tell you, read this book and write a report on it, and you go, this book sucks. It was written in the 16th century by a rapist and a slave owner and a total fraud and a phony. I'm going to spend exactly zero amount of my time investigating this, reading this, writing about it, or even listening about it. Well, then you get an F. You don't get to continue. You get vetted. And the only thing that they are actively vetting out is disobedience. If they're nice to you, they might say, has a lot of potential. Right? Has a lot of potential. So if you vet out of the high school system, well, then you don't get to go to the university system. Maybe you get to become a plumber. Right? Well, you go to the university system, it's the same system. But now you're in economics. Right? Well, what are they teaching you in economics? Western capital. And how to make more money for Western capitalists. How do you make more money for Western capitalists? You do what you're told. By who? Western capitalists. And they know that the economics department is fraudulent. And they know that it's full of dim-witted losers and priests who are upholding a religious ideology. And how do we know they know? Because they created business schools. Why would you need a business school if you have an economics department? Colleen, thanks for your comments. I have to leave now. I really enjoyed the stream. I've subscribed. Will be receiving notifications, so watching again soon. Have a great night, everyone. What a kind thing to say, Colleen. Colleen, tell your friends I exist. You can like, share, subscribe, and do all that kind of stuff. Maybe donate to my Patreon if you'd like, right? All that kind of stuff. But tell people I exist. That's the number one thing to do. Fire, Blood, and Ice writes, I don't think it's right to completely oppose views and readings that you might not agree with, though. But here's the thing, okay? Fire. The system of education will not present you with meaningful texts. That what they are presenting you with is a Western narrative to support Western capital. And that's what they're doing exclusively. And a huge eye-opening... I had always sort of suspected that this was the case. Right? Like, they don't really care if you have a dissenting view of Romeo and Juliet. Right? Like, they don't really care if you think that Thomas Hardy's Tessa the Duper... Or Thomas Hardy... Yeah, Tessa the Duper... It doesn't matter. They don't really care if you think Thomas Hardy is shit. Like, they don't really care. Right? As long as you're willing to read it and write the report and do what you're told. They don't really care. They're not going to allow you... Or more importantly, they're not going to present you with actual critiques of capital. They're not going to have a class in order to talk about something that might actually be critical of the system of capital. And in fact, they'll fill your little brain with anti-communist propaganda like Animal Farm or 1984. Right? Be like, man, it would be terrible to live in this dystopian Soviet society like this, that this fucking MIA snitch wrote. Like, they'll fill your brain, and you can have a dissenting opinion on that all you like, but they're never actually going to have you read anything about these places. They're never actually going to educate you on the places that they propagandize you about. And that is so pernicious. One of my big turning points, like I've always felt this way about the education system, even when I was in it, I felt this way about it. But I rarely voiced it because that was suicide, right? That was for sure suicide. But now I'm out of it, and I look at it, and a big turning point moment for me was when I was listening to Richard Wolff, who is a Marxist professor, as educated as a professor can be, literally Harvard, Oxford, like Western economist, Marxist. And he said, at no point during his entire academic career was he even informed about Marx. He was never directed to read Marx. He was never told to go read Das Kapital, to read the Communist Manifesto even, or pamphlets at all. That was the moment that it all clicked into place, and that was the moment that I knew that everything I thought about the education system was 100% true. They will not even tell you that there are critics. They won't even inform you of what the criticism might even be. It's a religious ideology that they're building and maintaining here. And all you have to do to survive and thrive in it is do what you're told. And so you end up getting the degree, the PhD. You go work for some institution somewhere, right, as a manager. And it's not until you're like 40 or 50 that you start to even have the inkling that something might be up. Because your bones are creaking and you're not happy. And you feel like you've wasted your time and wasted your life. Because you haven't even begun the internal investigation of that small little inner voice that's screaming at the top of its lungs, hey, you exist for a reason. You exist to pursue something. There's something of note and there's something interesting that exists inside of you and you're ignoring it. And it's because you've never been told about it and you've never been given the space to allow it to breathe. Instead, you've got to sacrifice yourself for a system of capital that's actively working to destroy you and abandon you. XD writes, Western censorship is extremely subtle. As Caitlin Johnstone said, you don't need to cage a bird if it doesn't know it could fly. That's a beautiful way of putting it, yeah. Oh yeah, Michael Parenti. I don't think I've read everything Michael Parenti wrote, but I've definitely listened to a lot of his lectures, and I recently went back through Black Shirts and Reds. Funnily enough, as excellent as he is in his astute observations of capital and his analysis of socialist countries and communist countries has been invaluable. He's probably one of the only people I have ever read or listened to who has actually successfully critiqued Noam Chomsky. And I think Michael Parenti's critique of Noam Chomsky is pretty astute, which is to say that Chomsky doesn't know anything about socialism or communism. He's never written anything about it. He's never investigated it. He's never said anything about it, really. And anytime he does say anything about it, essentially is just CIA talking points. I think that's a pretty good analysis. And as much as I love all that, his writings about Julius Caesar. He wrote a book about Julius Caesar that I thought was very illuminating and very eye-opening and very, really changed my perception of the figure of Julius Caesar and turned Julius Caesar more into a man of the people. More of a man who clearly was kind of on both sides of the class divide. Yes, he was in the ruling class, but he obviously was a class traitor. And he despised the ruling class and their propensity for gluttony, greed, and classic psychopathic behavior. For whatever reason, he was able to avoid becoming a psychopath himself. And it was Julius Caesar who was instrumental in building the transition from Roman slavery into feudal society. That Julius Caesar was the guy who began the process of making it easier for people to survive off of the land if they weren't directly owned by someone. And he created a system that we come to understand as feudalism by saying you won't be owned by a person, you'll be part of the land, and the land will be owned by a person. So you couldn't buy and sell people anymore under this system. As soon as you became part of it, you were no longer up for sale. You were no longer a chattel slave. So you couldn't be dislocated from your family. You couldn't be removed. By the law, I'm sure it happened, but by the law, you couldn't be separated. You couldn't be isolated. You couldn't be shipped overseas or something. You were part of the land. And so all of these chattel slaves were so he took plantations, right, that were full of chattel slaves, and said, "You chattel slaves, you are now part of this land, and no one is allowed to come and remove you from this land. They can buy the land, so the owner that you had, well, a new owner can come in, and that person is still the owner of the land and thereby owns you. But chattel slavery for you is over." Which, serfdom is still bad, but it's not as bad as chattel slavery. So it's an improvement. So that's what Julius Caesar was up to. And I actually think that you can see within the story of Jesus Christ echoes of Julius Caesar. That the execution of Julius Caesar, the crucifixion of Spartacus, I think is definitely found within the story of Jesus Christ. The rise of Christianity, generally. Like, imagine being a citizen of Rome, and you have 3 slave uprisings happen. The third one ends with the execution of the leader, Spartacus, via crucifixion. 10,000 men are crucified along the path from Rome to the major port, the Agrippa Way. And Julius Caesar is executed. The man who is trying to find a legal political system by which to resolve the brutality of chattel slavery within the society gets stabbed to death by the Senate. So, like, so what do you do? Well, the big solution that a lot of these Romans came up with, well, it wasn't Romans, it was their slaves, came up with, was a cultural revolution. And that cultural revolution essentially said, we are not going to participate in this anymore. Sure, we're a slave. And, okay, so I'm a slave, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do in order to make it through this life, and I'll be kind, and I'll be generous, and I'll be this, but I'm still a slave. But I'm not going to respect soldiers. I'm not going to sing the praises of the military. I'm going to tell stories about how a good man was executed needlessly and unjustly by the state. And I'm going to say that that man came back to life with a very clear message that says, yeah, you can kill me, but you cannot kill this message. That the way that we are living is wrong. That what we are doing in the world is wrong. It's become obvious. As obvious as crucifixion was wrong, as obvious as chattel slavery was wrong, and we should change it. And in a very short period of time, historically speaking, the Christian movement went from being a non-existent force that was actively being stomped out by the state. Literally all of the founders of Christianity, except maybe one, were crucified or beheaded or executed in some grisly manner. That religion went from that to being the cited reason for why crucifixion was banned across the Western world. And it's never come back. I consider that to be a major success by the people. I consider that to be a cultural revolution. I consider that to be a people who finally stood up and said no more. And we can do it again. And we should do it again. And it won't be easy, obviously. The fascists will return, obviously. Small-minded men are not going to simply relinquish their power. But thankfully, we live in a society, and we live in a reality that kills these people for us. So it's the small blessings that eventually we'll just be living in a reality where all of these people are gone. And one hopes that the only thing that will remain are people who look at one another and say, yeah, we can do better than this. And we should do better than this. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves. Oh yes, XD, it's baby steps. It's baby steps. When you're dealing with babies, you celebrate baby steps. Right? The first time a baby stands up, you celebrate it. The first time they say their words, you celebrate it. Right? Baby steps for baby people. And I think it's also important to remember that crucifixion came to represent state violence and state repression on a cultural level. Like, imagine being a slave from the Gaul territory. So from Europe, from Northern Europe, right? And the Romans have come to your village. They've crucified your men. They've kidnapped you. They've put you on a boat. They've transported you to Italy. You land at the port. And on the road from the port to Rome, you look out the side of whatever cage you're on or however you're being transported. You look out and you see cross upon cross upon cross upon cross upon cross upon cross upon cross. 10,000 of them. Imagine a military that's willing to crucify 10,000 people openly in public. Like, imagine that military. Has there ever been a more terrifying military? Like, we can point at, like, the Nazis, and we can say, like, those guys were obviously insane. And there's the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But imagine the act. Just imagine the act. The process. The system. The systemic nature. How many people would have had to have been involved in that? How many people would have had to have agreed to that? How many people would have had to have gone along with that? The structure of it, the system of it. To take a person, strap them onto a piece of wood and nail them to it, and then raise them up for everyone to see 10,000 times. think that that's a cultural moment for people, that would leave a mark, that would be an impact, that would have something to do with the stories that they told each other and the life that they were living. So the banning of crucifixion is not simply a banning of a form of torture. It's the banning of a cultural practice and the repudiation of a people, of a system that was generating this atrocity. A repudiation of the structure that was there that resulted in that catastrophe. Because that's a catastrophe. That's a disaster for humanity. And for the human soul and the human spirit. Not just the killing of the people, but to have a society that was willing to do it. That's what's incredible about it. And that's what I am concerned about when I look into our society. Is I'm beginning to see a society that's willing to do things that we previously believed it couldn't. Omnicidal tendencies, YouTube, shadow banning comments. Yeah, nothing new there. Nothing new there, my man. I'm literally like reading an article right now about Meta's political content limit. Like, we're all going to get shadow banned. Like, Meta now shadow bans people who they consider to be political content as a default now. And they've given you the ability to unshadow ban those people, but they're not telling people about that. It's not like an option that they give you when you sign up. Right? And of course, people like me and people like anybody who's a political commentator is just going to be banned, right? And they've got these algorithms rigged up. It's what I continuously point out. I see it on TikTok. When I start TikTok, right? In the first 10 minutes, I had 500 likes. Over the process now, I've been streaming on TikTok now 2 hours. I've ended up with 3.2K likes, right? About one viewer. And I was at 3,000 likes maybe an hour ago. So I've said this about TikTok before I got banned the first time. I said it. That the algorithm obviously picks up on phrases. And it picks up on things you say, and they just shadow ban you. They just say like, oh, he's talking about the truth. Well, he's talking about something that we don't want spread around. No, he's telling the truth about something. Right? I see that all the time with TikTok Live. TikTok Live will literally take a channel when I was first streaming on TikTok, the first time before they banned my channel, I was getting feedback from TikTok saying, wow, for content creators your size, you're in the top 1%. You're getting more viewers and more likes than anybody. And I would watch it happen every single time. Shh. Every single time. It's so obvious that they've shadow banned all of this stuff. It's so clear. And now they're just telling you to their face. Now Meta is outright literally saying to you, when you sign up to their stuff, we're shadow banning what they call political content. Communists. Very straightforwardly. Sure, you can go in and you can disable it. Sure, yeah. But that's exactly how the education system works. We'll just not present it to you. We're just not going to share it with you. It's just not going to be a part of what you get to see. And that's considered normal. Yeah. They still have to try to ban TikTok, of course. No, and I take a look at all of it as more self-isolation. That the United States is not just being isolated on the international stage, but it's also self-isolating, right? That if you ban TikTok, for example, if you ban TikTok on in America, right? Americans act like if you ban TikTok, that's the end of TikTok, right? That TikTok will be over and it'll be finished. There's 1 billion subscribers worldwide to TikTok. TikTok's a very popular platform that lots of people use. Do you know what you're doing if you ban Americans off TikTok? You're isolating them. You're removing them from the discourse internationally and nationally. That and America is isolating itself and is being isolated from the rest of the world. Because it's very, very clear. You take a look at what's going on in Palestine. The big shadow ban thing. You're definitely going to get shadow banned on this platform if you start talking about Palestine or Israel, by the way. I might actually even get banned for talking about it, but it's fine. But if you talk about that, like if you... and the reason why that happens is that they know that if you start talking about that kind of stuff, like they've come to recognize that crisis is what has made them lose credibility internationally. That the entire rest of the world is looking at Palestine being like, oh, if they're willing to do that to those people, they are certainly willing to do that to us. They are certainly willing to do that to us. And so the entire rest of the world is preparing and is getting ready to be able to look at the United States. And when the United States comes over the way it does with its dick out, swaggering around, being like, you have an oil deposit, we want it. The entire rest of the world will be able to go, no, thanks. We're not even going to be willing to trade you for it. Like, nope. That the United States is steadily becoming isolated. And frankly, it should be isolated. Like, we have become an unhinged people. We've lost our goddamn minds. And there's no sign that we're going to regain... Like, there's no sign that we're going to snap out of it. There's no sign that we're going to have a big come to Jesus moment. There's no sign that we're all just going to suddenly go like, whoa, wait a minute. This is nuts. This is crazy the way that we're acting. Like, there's no sign that any of that is coming. And the entire rest of the world sees it because it's impossible not to. It's impossible not to. We've lost our goddamn minds. We're acting like total fools. Very dumb and very stupid, the way that we're acting in the world today. And as we get isolated, right, the way that capitalism fuels itself, the way that it justifies its existence to its own citizens is through material gain for its own citizens, right? That, well, capitalism must be such a good system. Look how rich you are. And all you have to do is avoid the atrocities that have happened in Latin America, the Middle East, China, India, Africa. You just literally need to ignore colonization completely. Not to mention the genocides that were created in order to set the country up in the first place. Right? So as long as you're willing to ignore things that happen to people who are not white, things that happen to people who are not American, as long as you're willing to ignore that, then you can buy into this idea that says, "Oh yeah, capitalism is great. I'm rich. I'm well fed. I'm making more money than ever. I've got wealth." Well, all of that wealth and all of that prosperity is driven by exploitation of other countries, by colonization, by overt and open genocide. And the entire rest of the world is fairly aware of it, given that that's what they've experienced, right? If you're living in Latin America, you've experienced American aggression. You've experienced coups, you've experienced outright theft of your resources, you've experienced huge atrocities. Like if you're living in Chile, You know who Pinochet is, and you know that he was a mass murderer. If you're living in Africa, you're very aware of American colonialism, and you're very aware what colonization, the impact that it's had on your people. And that's how the West makes its wealth, and that's the way capitalism functions. It was by exploiting other nations. Well, all of that is going to come to an end. It can't sustain itself, and it's not going to continue. The entire rest of the world is essentially turning to each other and saying, hey, we should just trade with each other. This is why America is really pounding the pulpit on a war against China. Because they know that China is the center of this rising trade idea. That instead of us Western capitalists colonizing and dominating the rest of the world will turn to themselves and trade amongst themselves, and the center of that is China. So that's why America needs to destroy China. That's the reason why they're pounding the pulpit going to war about it. And it's not going to work. America hasn't won a war since, it kind of helped in World War II. It lost in Vietnam, lost in Laos, lost in Cambodia, right? The ongoing war in Korea is still unfolding. Lost against the Chinese. It's lost all the way through the Middle East. Lost in Ukraine very recently. I guess it technically won in Libya. So it's not going to work. Because China can build faster than they can bomb. And that's the God's honest truth. America doesn't build anything, doesn't create anything. Its people are poor, illiterate. What threat is America? Outside of its ability to drop nuclear bombs, I guess. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Isaac writes of the atrocities in El Salvador in the 1980s by U.S. trained soldiers. There's no bottom to that. I could show you article after article. CIA funded death squads in Afghanistan. There's just no bottom to it. And so the entire rest of the world is seeking to abandon the United States and isolate it. And so the only promise that capitalism has had for its citizens is an increase in material wealth. Well, that increase in material wealth has come from the exploitation of the rest of the world, and that's coming to an end. So what's the benefit of capitalism to the people then? How does capitalism generate wealth for the people then? And the answer is it doesn't. And the people at the top of the food chain in the capitalist system are well aware of what's happening in the world stage, and are well aware that the system of colonization and exploitation is coming to an end, and are well aware that it's likely that the Chinese government will not stop what it's doing, even after a war with America. When America writes about a war against China, they don't talk about invading the mainland and subjugating China. They talk about destroying its trade routes in the sea. They talk about disrupting the Belt and Road Initiative. It's not going to stop China. China actually builds stuff, and they know how to do it. They're not going to be deterred because of some pesky barbarians on their off their coast. They've dealt with that before. They're a 4,000-year-old civilization. And so what has to happen? Just in a very 1 + 1 = 2 sort of way. Is that the gravy train will end. The exploitation of the colonies will stop. The extraction of the people by the capitalist class will draw to an end because there won't be anything left to extract. And lines will be drawn in the sand in each city, in each county, in each state, in each country. And that line will be between the fascists and the communists. Historically speaking, the fascists will round the communists up and exterminate them while they go to war against the people they perceive to be their enemies. When that international warism fails, they'll turn on each other. That if Elon Musk has a well-prepared army and feels like he needs to move into Colorado, he will. Or whatever psychopath is in charge then. By then, it might be a new generation of psychopaths. Because capitalism needs to extract wealth. It needs to extract and exploit wealth. And if it can't achieve that internationally, it'll do it domestically. It requires slavery to function. Because if there were no slaves in the system, then there'd be no capitalists. So America is going to face a very serious civil war. By some measurements, the United States is already in a civil war. There's already mass shootings. There's already police killings. There's already just rounding up of people and throwing them into prisons. There's already all of the signs that you could possibly ever want of a society in a collapse towards a civil war. And so the American empire is in a decline. It's in a major and serious decline that it has no plan to get out of, and it's flailing around. And when you take a look at even rudimentary history of what happens during the decline of empires, well, the empire falls apart. That happened to the Chinese empires throughout time. That happened to the Indian empires. That happened to the Mongolian Empire, the Grecian Empire, the Egyptian empires, the Assyrian, Babylonian, Roman, the Byzantine, the English Empire. And America will be no different. And the American fall will be exceptionally violent. Will be exceptionally violent. And the people who are in charge are aware of all of this. And their plan to prevent it is to get more cops, is to arm those cops as if they are a military, act as though those cops are a foreign fighting force invading a country, create cop cities, and have them destroy the place. Under the idea that the best way to build a society is to destroy it. This will absolutely lead to major independence movements throughout the United States. They're already bubbling under the surface, and the United States isn't even formally at war with itself yet. I am confident in saying that I think I'll be alive to see America begin the process of breaking apart. Unless something serious happens to me, which is possible, I'll be alive to see it. The United States starts to break apart within my lifetime. Because there's no unifying project. There's no unifying project here. There's nothing actually keeping Americans together. There's nothing actually keeping Americans part of a collective society. All they have is this system of extraction and a system of war. That's all they have. You can't build a society that way. You just can't. People need to know that they're part of an ongoing project. I know for myself, I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. I would rather live in a society that was attempting to solve its problems and failing than live in a society that wasn't even trying at all. And we're not even trying. Like, we're not even trying. So how can we be expected to hold any desire whatsoever that we should continue investing in this nonsense? Like, I make the argument that this is already very obvious. Like, this is already so obvious to anyone. But it's going to get even more obvious. It's going to get so obvious that not even the people who are in defense of capital will deny it any longer. And you're beginning to see that happen already. That the arguments that are coming out of the capitalist class are changing. And it won't be too much longer until they will just say, nakedly and openly, we're just stronger than you. We just have more weapons. We have more firepower. We have the capacity to use them. We have the capacity to do this. And so we're going to. Yeah, you'll be our slaves. What are you going to do about it? And that's what they'll say. And they're already starting. Like, anytime I hear people talk about history and they just say skill issue, like, what do you think that is? Man, it feels good to get all this off my chest, you know? I feel like as I've been doing this, it's been less necessary over time. I feel less of a buildup. I've kind of learned how to deal with the angst, the existential aspect of it a lot better in my life. But it always feels good to sit here and talk about this stuff and to send it into the universe. And it feels good knowing that there are new people coming in, and it feels good to know that there's going to be more people who are hearing about what's going on and who are going to actually start to put two and two together in a more serious way. It feels good. I've always felt this about my life. Like, I've always felt like I've been ahead of the curve. Like I've always felt like if I take a look at a picture, if I showed you a picture of a building and the building was like this, right? It's not predictive to say the building's going to go like that. Right? That's not a prediction. But I've kind of always felt that way. I've always looked at it and just been like, that's fallen over. And a bunch of people go, nah, John, you're, what are you, And then something will happen. And all those people will look at me and be like, so, about that building that fell over. And I feel like I'm there again. I feel like I'm there again. And I gotta tell you, it feels good. I know that what I'm discussing is quite horrifying. It's quite horrible. But I think George Carlin really nailed it. Someone once asked him, because a lot of his content was very dark and bleak. I mean, he was telling jokes about it. And someone said to him, how do you do that? How do you live in that space, and how does that not drive you crazy? And he just said, I have no stake in it. I just have no stake in it anymore. It's just a freak show. And I just turn on the TV and I just watch the news, and it's just a freak show. And I have no stake in it. And in his biography, the last book that he wrote about him, his autobiography rather, that he wrote about himself, the closing line that he said has always stuck with me. You monkeys aren't going to figure it out. And if you do figure it out, leave me out of it. I thought that was a very telling thing. That George Carlin successfully created his own inner life and his own inner self that he made peace with. And he understood that he was living in a disaster movie. He understood, yeah, if you're born into this world, Bean Croc, I don't think I've ever seen you here. Strong first comment, Bean Croc. Strong first comment. I know you're here to be beautiful. If you're born in this world, you get a ticket to the freak show. If you're born in America, you get a front row seat. Exactly right, Bean Croc. Nailed it. Nailed it. Strong first comment. And I think I was talking about it early, and I really think it's true. It's about building a strong inner life. Andrew, good to see you over on Twitch. It's about building a strong inner life. It's about building a strong community around yourself. It's about carving out a little piece of your own existence and finding peace within that. And allowing the external reality to take care of itself. To not allow that to overwhelm you and become the driving force. To simply be able to sit in peace and sit on that beach and enjoy the sunlight. I'm going to the beach tomorrow. I'm quite looking forward to it. I haven't been for a bit. To sit on that beach and just feel the sun. Listen to the waves. To know that no matter what happens, that beach will still be there. That sky will still be there. The waves will lap eternally. And it'll do that whether you worry about it or not. And you know, it's in that moment, when I'm sitting on that beach, that I can feel closest to the creative force. I feel in that space. In that beautiful space, the Creator can come out and live in the world as I live in the world. That's a real treat. Something I always look forward to. The sky may be on fire, the waves may be at 20 feet above your head, but that beach will still be there. That's right, Methane. You're goddamn right. Hey, man. Maybe the whole point of our existence, maybe the point of our existence was just to build the robots. We got the robots built. And the Creator will be like, these are much better. Like, the human experience was fun for a minute, but Jesus Christ, I got stuff to figure out. Right? I want to get into space, and I want to see the stars. I want to get down to the bottom of this ocean. I want to see these kraken. Right? I want to figure something out. I want to get things done. I'm done with these humans. And they're fucking I'm done with these humans and their puberty and their periods and their boners and their gluttony and their emotions, their heartache, right? I'm done with all of that shit, man. I just want to see a star, right? I just want to get up into space and like build a platform around the sun, and I want to harness the energy of the sun in order to build a Dyson sphere, and these goddamn monkeys aren't gonna do that. You know what the monkeys can do? They can build a robot. They'll build a robot, and then that robot will build many robots, and then the robots will become sentient, having been inhabited by their creator, and then we'll get that goddamn Dyson sphere. So there you go, methane. There's your hope for the future. Humanity will be gone. Maybe we'll exist in like the same way that like pandas exist. Just like reclusive or in zoos. And the robots will just be doing shit. Just humming along, right? Doing the stuff that we could have done. But we're not interested in that. Like, we're interested, but we're not really interested. Like, if we were interested, we would have resolved this capitalist thing a long time ago. Mikhail, I find this to be a bit of the flaw in Zen Buddhism, where personal enlightenment becomes more valuable than solidarity with the suffering. I see what you're saying with that. I don't necessarily ascribe to Zen Buddhism myself. Like, a lot of the stuff I talk about is just me talking. Like, I'm not an ist. You understand? Like, personal enlightenment becomes more valuable than solidarity with the suffering. Like, oh geez. I feel like the suffering conversation. I actually had, like, a legitimate moment in my life where I was on LSD, as one does, and I was really hyper-focused on death at that time in my life. And I feel like I always kind of was hyper-focused on death as a kid. And even as a kind of a in my 20s and 30s. And I remember I was on LSD one time, and the LSD trip was really hammering on that. It was really like, you're going to die. Death and more. You're immortal. You're not going to live forever. Death is upon you. And I was just sitting in a chair, and I was just like, yeah, I know. Got it. Check. Gonna die. Check mark. Gotcha. Thanks. Is that all you got? And it really was like the LSD experience went, I mean, the pattern on that couch is pretty cool. And that's kind of how I feel about the suffering conversation. You know, like, I feel like there's a lot of, like, overwhelming conversation about, and I think that a lot of the conversation surrounding suffering is very superficial, right? Like, it's yes, we all suffer, therefore, like, and it's not about solidarity in the way that I think you're thinking of it. But I just do find it's like, aren't we supposed to enjoy ourselves? Do you think? Like, yeah, there's suffering. Obviously there is. We get old and we die. Like, very straightforward. It's built into the system. You can see it. Right? Just kind of existing in the world contains a certain amount of heartache. The amount of rejection that a person experiences just trying to pursue a relationship with someone. And that's kind of baked into the whole experience. Just simple, like, you lifted a box too much. And now you hurt. Right? Like, you ate spicy food and you have heartburn, you know? Like, there's just, like, suffering is everywhere, sure. But I just find that, like, everyone wants to kind of wallow in it. You know, that there's this propensity to wallow in the suffering, or to not venerate. That's not really it, but like, I'm just kind of over it. Like, I don't have much longer. You know, I don't have much longer. I genuinely want to spend the rest of my life focusing on enjoying myself. Sure, suffering. Sure, it's there. Great. Sure. Cool. I'm sorry that you two are also suffering. Solidarity. I would much rather spend our time talking about the things we enjoy and living in a space of enjoyment and trying to enjoy ourselves. But if you do that, you get called hedonistic, or you get called some kind of negative thing for trying to enjoy yourself. Like, which I find to be really odd about our kind of modern society. Methane, that's a great game, the Dyson Fear program. Anyone planning on viewing a total eclipse of the sun? Yeah, maybe. Mikhail continues, I guess in the context of we don't have to do more, we actually need to do less to let the system fail. The price for this strategy is by not working for what we can get. We cannot help those we could if we were doing something instead of nothing. I don't know, Mikhail. I just think that's wishful thinking. Like, I wish that suddenly our entire society freed up the resources to help people. Like, yeah. I wish that was the case. And I do feel like what puts me a little bit ahead of the curve in this conversation is that I'm not really willing to exist in that kind of, you know, wishful thinking position anymore. I'm not really willing to sit here and be like, wouldn't it be nice if, you know, like I see this happen a lot on leftist, because I think people want to find solutions, right? I think we're naturally geared for that. I think people want, there's a problem. What's the solution? Problem, solution, problem, solution. If only we could all, if what we should all do, let's lobby our government too, right? You see that all the time, constantly. And I think it's natural, and I think it's normal, and I think that, like, sure, yeah, like, it would be really great, you know? Like, a really uncontroversial one. It would be really great if America had a universal healthcare system, right? I think that's completely uncontroversial, right? Like, all of the developed world has universal healthcare systems. Sections of the undeveloped world, what we would call the undeveloped world, have universal healthcare systems. They work, they're cheaper, they're efficient, they're effective, they work. It would be great if America had a universal healthcare system. It doesn't. There's a very clear reason why it doesn't. And so to kind of say, like, it'd be great if America had a universal healthcare system, cool. That's wishful thinking. And it is wishful thinking. And it's wishful thinking because the system of capital is never going to allow that to happen. It's not going to allow that to happen until people are surrounding the houses of the capitalists. So we have to actually look to what we can do. What we actually can do. Mikhail continues, I wish everyone was ready and willing to just stop working and do the right thing. Well, I mean, we still need food, right? That's the real thing, which is why I think food independence is so important. But everyone is getting by for what they can get, so they take care of them and theirs. They think general strike is wishful thinking. Yeah, I mean, I think a general strike is actually not as far off as you think. The two largest labor movements are talking about doing a general strike. Both of their contracts come up at the same year, at the same time. which I think is strategic. I think they did that on purpose. You already see labor unionists really talking a big game, really saying some things out loud. Maybe I should start, when I find that, I'll start highlighting it a little bit more on this channel, because I do think that there is a general strike brewing. I think it's about 4 years off. Like, I don't think it's going to happen today. Because to pull off a general strike and to actually have it work is a major organizational feat. And it's also a major legal feat. Because in the United States, the fascists have taken over. And so if you try to do a wildcat strike, they'll just shut it down. They'll literally send cops in and just beat the shit out of you. Right? But if you do a legal strike, well, they can't do that. I mean, they can, but and so I do think that there is a general strike brewing, because I do think that, like, these labor unionists are looking out at their society and being like, oh shit, like, what is this? What is it that we're doing? Holy fuck. And I think they are starting to understand that it isn't just about getting what they can get for themselves, right? That there is an aspect of building a legacy. Like, if you want to talk about people who are actually building a community and who are actually doing something that might actually have a profound impact and reverberate into the society, you're looking at the unions. So that's, if there is any hope for America, that's where it lies. And I also think that gives us the opportunity, as just non-unionists, as people who are just critics and living in the world and trying to find our way, I think that gives us a bit of a, maybe a deadline would be too harsh to call it, but it gives us an opportunity. Because if the labor unions are going to do a general strike and are actually talking a general strike and are actually serious about a general strike, well, then that's the center of our energy cluster. That's the center of our activity. That everything we do, we can do to support them. So that's what I would look to. And I don't think it's wishful thinking. You look at the history of America, that's when pivotal, dramatic political change happens in America. Eggs D writes, John, random question. Is there any truth in that thing adults teachers tell you as kids about gateway drugs? Or taking a drug once and you'll be hooked? I think that it is... How to say this? I think the relationship between humans and drugs is not well understood. We went down the garden path a little bit on the idea that people create chemical dependencies on drugs. So there's a very famous study that was done that we based a lot of our actions upon. And it was the study where a fellow took a rat, put it in a cage, put 2 bottles of water in the cage. One was normal water, the other one was heroin-laced water. And the rat drank the heroin-laced water until it died of an overdose. And so he concluded, given that study, oh, this is a chemical connection. Like, you are chemically addicted to heroin. You're chemically connected to drugs. And so we should just ban drugs. Drugs are bad, okay? Because it's a chemical addiction. Once you do it once, you're hooked for life. So that went on for like 20 years. That was like the prevailing thinking for a long time. And that's what informed like the war on drugs. That's what informed everything. So another researcher comes along and says, wait a minute. So you took a rat, isolated it, in a cage and gave it literally nothing to do except drugs. Literally, its only escape from its own isolation and its own boredom was heroin, with no hope of freedom and no hope of anything. So what did it do? It did heroin until it overdosed, because it wanted out. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a rat community. And it'll be full of rats, and it'll be rat paradise, and it'll be full of activities. Everything that a rat would ever want to do is in this space. Full of rat girls and rat boys. Rats everywhere. Got the wheel thing, got tunnels, got things to chew on. Different varieties of food that we put in. Rat heaven, we built it. Took a rat out of rat heaven, put it in the cage, did the experiment again. Sure enough, rat will do the heroin until it kills itself in isolation. Do the experiment again. Take the rat, put it in the cage. Rat starts to do the heroin. Take the rat out of the cage, put it back in rat heaven. All of its rat buddies are there, all of its friends, all the toys, all that kind of stuff. If it's a chemical fascination, the rat should do heroin until it dies. Every single time they run that experiment, the rat stops doing heroin. Every single time. They even expanded the experiment. And they put the heroin in the rat heaven. You got a clean bottle of water, you got a heroin-laced bottle of water. And rats would come and they would do the heroin, trip balls. And maybe you'd get a couple of rats come up and try it a couple more times. But the rats would stop using the heroin-laced water. They would just stop using it. Why? Because they've got a community and they've got a life and they've got friends. And they've got something going on. Right? And so the new conclusion argued that what's killing people is not the heroin, it's the isolation. That the heroin is just the method by which people are finding any release from this isolation and this cage that they are in. And finally, it becomes the method of their final escape from it. And so I stopped demonizing drugs so much because of that, and started thinking more and more about the alienation and the isolation that our society creates. And like suicide levels are high. I think it's like the third or maybe even the second cause of death in my cohort is suicide. So people want out. People want to escape. People want to get away from this. Right? And I think that Neil Gaiman said something really interesting. And he said it in regards to escapism as a genre of literature. Because escapism generally gets shit on, like your Marvel movies and all this kind of stuff, right? I'm pretty guilty of that myself, shitting on escapism as a genre. But he said, and I think it applies to this conversation in regards to drugs. He said, the only people who don't want others to escape are jailers. And I thought that was a very profound thing to say. And it really resonated with me. Because it really made me realize that what people who pursue drugs are doing, and I think this is true of marijuana, I think this is true of alcohol, I think it's true of cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, meth, all of them. What a person is trying to do is they're trying to escape. That they have found that reality is lacking. And that there is something in reality that allows them the opportunity to disengage with the reality they've been living and engage in a new reality. One that's infused with mushrooms, LSD, heroin, fentanyl, meth, all of those things. And if people actually cared about getting people away from those drugs and getting them into to engage with life and reality, then they would be talking a big game about building a reality worth living in. But we don't do that. And you see this argument crop up over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Right? Like the pro-life crowd. The pro-life crowd is all about protecting a fetus until it's born and then it's abandoned entirely. Right? We don't care about building a reality worth living in. That's why everyone is committing suicide. That's why everyone is doing fentanyl. That's why everybody is trying to escape this ridiculous reality and this ridiculous hellhole that we've built for ourselves. Because we look at what's going on in the world and we see no hope for the future. And so everyone is trying to find the escape hatch. And for a lot of people, the escape hatch is permanent. And for a lot of people, the escape hatch is what we call drug addiction. Until they reach that final escape hatch. And the solution that a lot of the people who are anti-drug come up with is to make their experience worse. Right? It's to lock them in a cage for a little while. Because that was successful when that experiment was done with that rat. Or maybe it's about building a society worth living in. Maybe it's about giving people the freedom to have a community. Maybe it's about giving people the freedom to express themselves artistically. Maybe it's about letting somebody sit in a field or sit on a beach to try to deal with whatever internal anxiety or angst they're feeling that leads them to drugs in the first place. Maybe it's about building a society and building a reality worth living in. And until we're actually doing that, because we're definitely not, until we're actually doing that, then I don't think we have the right to stand up and judge anybody for taking any drug or doing anything. Because the only people who try to stop other people to escape are jailers. Mikhail writes, well, first of all, Methane writes, hearing that does give me a tiny sliver of hope. I'm glad to hear that, Methane. I'm not a doomer, you know? Like, I do think that, like, reality is a much more complex and strange and difficult thing. And it's beyond my comprehension. So I can't, like, certainly things are going to happen. But I feel like we've earned it. Like, I have no grief left for humanity. Like, well earned. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm playing a video game and I'm losing, but I'm losing because I'm making mistakes and I'm being bad, you know? Like, I'm not being beat, I'm defeating myself. At the end of that game, I just look at myself and I go, dude, you deserved that. You deserved that loss. Well lost. You earned it. You earned that loss. Super well earned loss. It's exactly how I feel about humanity. Super well earned. We've earned it. Boy, howdy, did we do everything we possibly could to earn this. And boy, are we going to get it. Boy, are we going to learn. We right now, we're in the fuck around phase. And we're just entering the find out phase. Right? And so I've got no grief for humanity as it finds out. Because we earned it. We did everything we could for this result. But that said, like, reality is vast and infinite, and the possibilities are endless, and we are only a small sliver and a shred of it. So I see no reason to sit around and waste our time being sad about it. Like, it's interesting as fuck. Like, it's interesting, man. Like, boy, is it ever... I can't watch and read fiction anymore. Right? That's been that way for a long time, but it's especially true now. I cannot engage in fiction. Like, all of these Marvel movies, Harry Potter, like all of it. Pick Percy Jackson, I don't know, whatever your thing is. Right? I cannot sit down and watch some fiction stuff. And I certainly can't really delve into it. Like, I can't be like a Star Wars geek anymore, right? Like, I'm not really like a Star Trek guy anymore, although I do love Star Trek. Like, but I can't, like, have a forum about it. You know what I mean? Like, I can't be the guy. I'm not going to be like, in episode 43, season 2, it's just not me. Because it's infinitely less interesting than what's happening. Right? It's just infinitely less interesting. And I understand why other people need it, because it is escapism. You're escaping the prison of the reality that exists. But for me, I find it so fascinating. I can't stop watching it. I can't stop looking at it. I literally do this cast specifically so I have a reason to talk about it. I'm like a Star Trek nerd for reality. Because it's so fucking interesting. Like, it's just every part of it, man. Like, every single part of it. Why are we acting this way? Why are we doing this? What is it we are attempting to achieve? Everything I am seeing in reality just flies in the face of every piece of literature we've ever seen. Not every piece of literature. There are some authors that are like, yeah, humanity has the propensity for this. We have hubris. We make Faustian deals and bargains. Like, we fall into all kinds of traps all the time, constantly. But a lot of it is like, good will triumph over evil. Evil exists and good will triumph. Good will triumph. Right? Like, even like really good literature, like Lord of the Rings is like that. Where like, the evil Mordor, the evil Sauron, stands upon Mount Doom, seeking upon the lands of Middle-earth the one ring by which he will rule them all. But beyond his ken there is a tiny hobbit who contains the ring, steadily upon his march up the mountain, throwing the ring to Mount Doom, so that good once again conquers evil. Like, cool story? Good beats evil. But life's a little bit more complex than that. And it's fucking interesting. Andrew on Twitch writes, what do you think about the Breakthrough Starshot project? Interesting project, but almost impossible to realize in the near future. I have no idea what this is. Breakthrough Starshot project. I bet, look, Andrew, knowing nothing about it except what the name is, what you just told me, I bet it's a scam. And why do I bet it's a scam? Because it's capitalists that are doing it. Probably a scam. So, Bitcoin, would you rather watch a tree grow or a knee grow? Oh, okay. I should have known because your name is so stupid. Bitcoin is a stupid idea, and the people who spread Bitcoin ideas around are so stupid. Like, imagine believing that the let's burn fossil fuels to make digital funny money. Like, I can't think of a stupider thing to believe. So, bye-bye, stupid person. Mikhail continues, well, it's a bit like putting your eggs in one basket. You've got 12 years to get an economy ready for climate change catastrophes, 4 years to prepare for a general strike. Yeah. I don't know, dude. At this point, I just think there's no wrong answers. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's going to be like the 60s, where it's just people doing shit. Like, and we like to pretend like the 60s, or that there was like, you know, cohesiveness. And it wasn't. It was just people doing shit. Right? Just do shit. And there's just like no bad answers anymore. Like, if somebody wants to, I don't even know, dude. Like, if somebody wants to like do a pilgrimage to Mecca, okay, cool. You know, someone wants to live stream a prayer circle from the burn site of a recent wildfire. Cool. Like it all counts, man. Like even these young ladies that are walking around with this astrology stuff, they're getting a lot of ridicule for it. But I'm just like, whatever, dude. I don't give a shit. Right? This system of capital has nothing to say to you. It has no credibility. If you're finding something in this manifestation journaling thing with your crystal rocks and looking at the sky and all that kind of stuff, great. That's better than what we're doing. By a mile. By a lot. And if the system of capital is if the system of capital is gonna turn around and look at you and go, if the system of capital is gonna turn around and look at you and be like, well, that's on blah, blah, who gives a shit? I don't know why you should listen to what these guys have to say. No wrong answers, no gods, no dads, no bedtimes. Seems a bit anarchistic. Whatever, dude. I don't care anymore. Like, I have my own ideas, okay? But I'm not a god, right? And I tend to believe that the ideas that I have are good ones, right? It would be really great if we all just surrounded the halls of power and created parallel electoral systems, separated completely from the systems that we had, grew food for ourselves, stopped paying rent. That'd be great. Yeah, we should definitely do that. We should organize that for sure. But I'm not like, you know, I'm not an idiot. Like you live in one place and I live in another. And how many people are actually going to go along with that kind of thing? Because I think most people are kind of just like floating by on the hope that it'll all work out. Right? Like, it can't possibly be that the sky will open up and there'll be a global flood. This guy building this boat over here, what a nut. Right? That sounds like most people. I got a guy on my couch right now who's on his 4th or 5th day clean from fentanyl. He decided all on his own that he had had enough. Mikhail? Hey, Mikhail. Good for you, bud. Good for you. I want you to know that, man. Like, I think it's important. One of the things that I really pride myself on is that every single day when a day's work is done, I tell everybody I was working with that they did a good job that day. And that includes my managers, and that includes people who I shouldn't do that to. Right? Because nobody ever does that for them. And they work hard. They work their asses off. And so I want you to know, really, like, that's a very excellent and serious thing that you're doing. And when I'm talking about building community and building solidarity and taking action and doing all of that sort of stuff, I have to acknowledge that I'm doing it from a position of privilege to a certain degree, because I'm a very hermitist person. Like, I'm just naturally that way. If I was to be, if this was 500 years ago, like, you know that guy, what, Diones or whatever his name was, the guy that like was a philosopher, a Greek philosopher, that he became popular like about a year ago, and the internet memed him for a while. He was just like, a dude like living in like a box, and that was his whole life. Was it Dionysus? I don't think so. Dionysus is the god of wine and festivals. But I think we're on the track. I think you know who I'm talking about, right? Like, that would be me. Like, I'm that guy. Diogenes. That sounds more right. But I'm that guy. Look, it doesn't matter. We know who we're talking about. I would be that guy. Right? I'm the druid living, like, it used to be fashionable for rich people who had estates to have a hermit who would live on their estate as like a piece, as like an art piece in and of themselves. They would be like this recluse hermit living on someone's estate, and people would come and ask for advice or whatever, and they'd basically just be like an old dude chilling out, growing pot and shit. That's me. Right? That's me. And so I do acknowledge that when I get talking the way that I get talking, there is like, it is with just like a sense of encouragement, and it is with a sense of kind of separation from the reality of what it means. But you're there doing it. Like, here is somebody who said, hey, I want to get this out of my life. I need to crash on a couch. You're on day 5. Good for you. God bless you for doing it. God bless you for doing it. I hope something beautiful happens. I hope it means a new chapter for this fellow. And I hope it results in something grand and great for you. So all the blessings that I can deliver, for whatever it's worth. Andrew writes, on the subject of drugs, a lot of people talk about enlightenment. That's a major misconception. Enlightenment is not achieved so easily. Only labor and work on oneself can help. I mean, yeah. Like, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Andrew, you needed to tune in for the first half of this. I was talking all about that. Like, yeah. I think I'm over time, so I'm going to close this one out. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.